There we go. False start. Sorry about that. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Happy Friday to you all. Hope you're all hearing me okay. Sorry about the little false start there. I went to the wrong scene. Let me pull up chat so I can get hopefully a confirmation from all of you out there in Twitch land that you're hearing me loud and clear. Thank you so much for being here and for spending some time on your Friday with me. Really excited to be having a chance to chat with you all about Crucible. And not just Crucible, but Crucible and Ember and the interaction of the two. And we're going to get into a lot of details. I'm planning to spend the next couple hours just, going through everything about the system and taking questions from chat, talking about the key mechanics, doing like a demo, combat encounter so you can sort of see how some of the mechanics work. And we'll just maybe do a giveaway towards the end of the stream for anyone who sticks with it. It's going to be a good time. So thank you all again for being here. And without further ado, let's get into it a little bit. So I have a few announcements up front before we get into the heart of the stream. So the first one is, of course, that Ember is on Kickstarter. We are at over 2,500 backers now, which is so cool. And just today we posted our one of our campaign updates on the Crucible game system, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So there's a whole written out thing that has lots of information about Crucible. Now, you're going to get most of this information from the stream today anyways, but just wanted to point it out there, for those of you who are watching. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is that the Crucible game system itself has a update, an available update now, version 0.6.0, which is compatible with V12. It has a ton of new features and additions, and I'm going to be talking about what those features and what those additions are during the stream today. I'm going to give a summary of all of that stuff, and yes, what that would mean is that any of you who are thinking about Crucible as maybe something you're interested in, or you want to learn more, or you're considering it, contemplating it as a way you might want to experience Ember, you can now install this playtest scenario, the system, the playtest, what I'm going to show on stream here today. You can install this on your end, and you can play around with it, and you can see hands-on exactly how it's working. No need for a purchase, no need for to be a backer. Anyone who is a little echo. Anyone who has Foundry VTT can install this test. And so really excited for folks to dig into it. There's going to be bugs. Oh my goodness, there are going to be bugs. So please be understanding of the fact that Crucible is an alpha test. It is in an alpha state. There's a year, 2 years, I don't know how long. There's years of work still to do on Crucible as a game system. It's very big, it's very complex, it's going to require a ton of work. So, be understanding of the fact that things are unfinished. But it is in a playable state where you can try it out and you can see exactly what the game system's all about. If you are trying it out, a quick tutorial, a quick walkthrough of what you would need to do on your end to try out the system. You would go to your setup screen, you would install Crucible under the Systems tab, just the way you'd install any game system, create a world. Once you're in that world, in the compendium tab of the world under Crucible, there'll be a Crucible folder. Under that Crucible folder, there's a playtest, and in that playtest, you can import and you can get all of the playtest stuff. And that playtest, it's a very contrived scenario that we call the Ring of Valor. It's like a gauntlet style sort of gladiatorial thing. It's just designed for testing combat and testing mechanics, testing character advancement, testing progression. It's like a 6 challenge encounter gauntlet against various sets of adversaries that are designed to test different types of combat styles in the system. And so the playtest packet has instructions about each of those scenarios and how you work your way through it, along with, of course, all of the alpha stage, system rules that are all in the compendium about, how does the dice mechanics work, or how does engagement and flanking work. And so we'll go through a lot of these rules and we'll talk about what they mean, how they work. But that's just a little orientation for those of you who are, going to give this a try. So another thing is I did put this out before the stream, which, as some of you have pointed out, was a little bit of a bold choice. I might regret it. I don't know. There's probably going to be lots of bug reports while I'm live on Twitch, and I'll just be like, oh, kill me. But it's okay. I wanted to put it out so that, if any of you are home, if you have time to play around, you can always load up Crucible on your PC, like while we're on stream. You can play around with stuff while we're talking. You can, try some of the things that I'm showing, and you can use this as a little bit of a learning experience. And of course, this video will be available for rewatching on Twitch and on YouTube afterwards. So you can always use this as a reference for like trying certain things out in the system, and this can help you sort of follow along and understand how some things work. Okay, so I think I might follow a little bit the flow of the update post that we made about Crucible, because it was a pretty good outline of like things about the system. So what do I want to start by talking about Crucible? It's a game system that is made specifically for Foundry Virtual Tabletop. It draws a lot of inspiration from tabletop RPGs. It has character sheets and stats and skills and dice rolls, and it looks sort of like a game that you could play at your pen and paper physical table, but probably not. I mean, you could try, but some of the mechanics are quite crunchy, and therefore you'd be doing kind of a lot of math. But it's made specifically for the virtual tabletop, so all of that automation, all of that crunchiness, all of that mechanical intrigue is handled automatically under the hood and behind the scenes. So another thing about Crucible is that it is, something that it has a couple of very different features to conventional fantasy RPGs. It is predominantly designed for fantasy role-playing. You could probably adapt it for other types of games, but, the core of Crucible is for fantasy-based play. But it is quite extensible, and so I'm sure, that there are other possibilities. It is one of 2 game systems that you can use to play Ember, so either Crucible or D&D 5th edition. And Crucible is an option for playing Ember that, it's a system where we can really, really mesh the system design with the campaign design, with the setting design, with the UI UX of Ember. We can make these things play so nicely together, where we have sort of full control over the ecosystem of the VTT, the game system, the setting, the campaign. We control the end-to-end, the end-to-end thing, and we can make sure that everything just absolutely works, perfectly together. So, those are some of the things that Crucible is really exciting for us about in terms of the opportunities that it has. In terms of some of its like major features, it's a system that's really focused on really consequential and choice-filled character progression. You get to make a lot of choices as you advance your character, your abilities, your skills, the talent tree or the talent web that is at the core, the very heart of Crucible. This is a level 1 character, so I've only scratched the surface on this character about, what talents can be obtained through this web, but this is only a portion of what the Crucible talent web will eventually be. This is the first 4 tiers of talent nodes. There's going to be probably another 6 to 8 tiers that make this even more vast as we continue to expand. But classless level progression is one of the hallmark features of Crucible, and I'll talk a lot more about that as we go. But the idea that you're not committing to a class at level 1 or at character creation, you're just making choices as you progress, as you build your character out across this vast array of talents and this tree of talents that you can choose from. Now, each of these, it's important to note, and I'll talk more about the talent system in a bit, but each of these is not a talent. Each of these is in fact just a node, and each node, when you expand it out, has talent options within that node. So yeah, the amount of choices and the amount of options that you have at your disposal is really vast and really exciting, yeah, something that I think creates a huge amount of freedom of character progression. And you end up with characters that feel like they have a class because they've really crafted an identity of your character over the course of your role-playing lifetime with that character. You've created your own class rather than kind of, picking one. And so different characters will absolutely feel and play in meaningfully different ways, but not because you said I'm a paladin. It's because you've instead gone over here and you've purchased the Zealous Smite feature, and then you've gone and got the Justicar capstone, and you have Vow of Animus or whatever. It's your choices that have then defined the way that your character plays rather than a predefined progression path. Other things that are really kind of interesting and exciting about Crucible, you get to make so many choices when you level up, not just talents, but you're increasing your ability scores, you're investing in your skills. Another thing that's so important is that it is a dice pool based system. So, one of the things that means is that it's not a 1d20, it's not a d20 system at all. We don't actually use d20s, and so if it were a physical game, I would feel really bad because I know, the D20 is the crown jewel of everyone's sparkly math rocks collection. But at least as a digital game, I can feel slightly better about setting the D20s aside. Crucible uses a dice pool system that is a 3-die pool. And that pool starts as a 3d8. So for example, if I were to make a skill check with Intimidation, this little dialogue, it's a 3d8 dice pool, and then that dice pool is modified by a system of boons and banes. So boons are situational advantages that improve your likelihood of success. They could be situational, they could be because of a temporary buff that you have, either you gave yourself or like a synergy that you have with an ally. All kinds of reasons that you might have a boon or a bane. Boons work by upgrading the denomination of dice in your pool. So if we add two boons to the roll, our dice pool is now a d12 and a d8 and a d8. And so if we take those boons away, you can see how the dice in the pool upgrade, and boons work from left to right. Banes do not exactly offset boons because banes work from right to left. So if we add banes, then our third die is downgrading to a d4. So like 3 boons, 2 banes would be d12, d10, d4. And then they kind of start to play tug of war with each other in the middle. You can have up to 6 of each. And so there's a lot of degrees of stacking for like how you can gain situational advantages or situational malices, and high effectiveness gameplay in Crucible will often involve harmonizing with your allies and harmonizing your own abilities so that you can stack up multiple sources of boons and banes in order to get the best possible result on your roll. So the roll, on a sort of unmodified skill check, that 3d8 dice roll, that dice pool defines your base dice total, and then that's further modified by ability bonus, skill bonus, or enchantment bonus, which are additive bonuses on top of your base 3d8 pool. Crucible is a roll-over system, so any roll that you make, whether it's a skill check or an attack roll, it's made against a target threshold, and a success would be exceeding that target threshold. And the amount to which you exceed the threshold is meaningful. So you get higher degrees of success and more successful outcomes the higher that you roll on your roll. we'll get into combat in a little bit, but I think it's an important moment when we're talking about dice for me to emphasize that one of the cool things about Crucible is that combat is really fast-paced, because when you're making an attack in combat, so for example, with this character, let me tag Strike to be a favorite, so it's always here on my sheet. When I make an attack in combat with my Warhammer, hopefully it's a success. Yeah, so it's a hit. So there was no damage roll here. I've just made my attack roll, and the better that my attack roll does, the more damage I would deal to this target. So in this case, I deal 9 damage. I get a nice little animation because Crucible is integrated with JB2A, which is a really fun little toy. So I'll replay that. That's another cool thing, is I can undo the effects of the attack. So as you notice, like when the attack is resolved, it's automatically applied the damage result, it's automatically handled the animation. I can undo it if for some reason there was a mistake in play. It's also a setting that you can configure. So I'm gonna change this to self-target actions only. I may have to reload for that to take effect. I need to double check. I'll reload just to be safe. That will make it a little bit easier for me to explain what's happening. So when I strike at this creature again, my result, this time I missed. There's a confirmation button where, as the game master, I can show, I can confirm the results of that action. And anyways, I'll get a lot more into like what that workflow, what that flow looks like, what degrees of automation are there. I'll talk about all that in a little bit. But what I'm meaning to get across right now is that one of the very cool things about Crucible is that there's no separate damage roll. Better you roll on your attack roll, more damage you're going to deal. And yeah, so that's something that really speeds up combat. It makes things very crunchy and sort of very satisfying. Other really crucial things about Crucible, I mean, there's so much that I could get into here, and I will. But, we've got a lot of compelling character attributes. We've got a 2-pool system for your mental and physical well-being. We've got health as a short-term resource, and we've got wounds as a long-term reserve. We've got morale as a short-term resource, and madness as a long-term reserve. And so health and morale reflect kind of your current well-being in the short term, but wounds and madness, if you sustain lasting damage to either your physical body or your psyche, your spirituality, sort of spiritual well-being, then that damage accrues over time, and that long-term damage requires effort to heal. It's not just like I'm in a short rest or I'm in a long rest and it just goes away magically and I'm perfectly well again. Sustaining those amounts of long-term damage mean that you'll have to be tactical with your character choices. You might have to take periods of downtime in order to recover. You might have to pursue certain magical or non-magical means of restoring from those wounds. So that's an interesting thing about Crucible. Another really fascinating thing is that the action economy is extremely generous. So like we have an action economy, and I'm going to show a demo of this as I get into demonstrating the flow of combat or demonstrating some things for you. But there's really generous action economy. You get, on your turn, you get a pool of action to spend, which at an abstract level sort of represents how long certain things take in a time dimension. You get focus that allows you to perform sort of more supernatural or heroic feats that require the injection of kind of spiritual energy or spell casting capability. Focused isn't only used for spells, it's also used for martial or cunning sort of actions that require just that extra degree of kind of resource expenditure. But focus can represent kind of your ability to concentrate on or have energy for spellcraft, but it represents a lot of other things as well. And then there's Heroism, which is actually a new resource that's just added in the recent playtest. Now, there aren't many talents in the tree that spend Heroism yet. This is something that I need to add. I need to go back and add a lot more so that we have more opportunities to test the Heroism system. But Heroism is a generated resource, so when you start a combat encounter, Heroism starts empty with no points, and then as the combat encounter progresses, you earn Heroism points that then is kind of like a currency that you can spend on one of your like big heroic features. So you could think of it as like a sort of ultimate meter in like a MOBA kind of game or something. It's not quite that gamified, but the idea is that like as the tension of combat mounts, you eventually get a heroism point, and you can spend that heroism point to do like your big thing that makes a key difference in persevering in that combat encounter. Okay, I've talked briefly about stats, about skills. Crucible has 12 skills that are used heavily for, exploration and social gameplay, but they also show up in combat, so you can have ways to use many of these skills. Maybe not all of them, but honestly, usually all of them. There's ways to use all or almost all of these skills in a combat capacity as well, because there's specific talents on the tree that uses those skills in certain ways. But these skills reflect your character's knowledge, your talent with exploration, your capacity for socialization. So if I pull up a slightly higher level character here, like a level 6 character, the skills tab for that character where we've specialized in some things. So for example, this character has specialized in the stealth skill, and in addition to the kind of earlier ranks of the stealth skill that we acquired, this character specialized in the chameleon sub-specialization of the skill. And so yeah, there's a lot of depth of skill progression as well. That's a system that's going to be getting a lot more work in future playtests, but you've got your talents, you've got your skills, and then there's Spellcraft. I think the last thing I want to highlight before I start taking some questions and then doing some demos is the really compelling and expansive Spellcraft system in Crucible. So here's a character sheet that's more of a spellcaster. If we look at their talent tree, they've got the War Mage signature talent up here from this signature node. They've got a bunch of spellcraft talents that they've unlocked, and because they've unlocked those spellcraft talents, they know a lot of spell casting components. Crucible has a really unique approach to magic where there's two types of spells in the system. There's what's called a composed spell, which is where you use a combination of an arcane rune, a somatic gesture, and optionally a metamagic inflection to dynamically craft a certain spell. And I'll show some examples of that will be fun to show. The other type of spell is what's called an iconic spell. This is sort of like a specialized expression of magic that requires certain runes, gestures, or inflections to learn and to use. But the effects of an iconic spell can be very diverse, very far-ranging. It can really do like anything that we want the iconic spell to do. The framework is there in Crucible's action system to support all kinds of specialized effects that don't pop out really organically from the composed spell system. So I've said a lot of things. I think it's really going to be best for me to sort of like show more, and I think like learning by doing is going to be a great way to showcase things. But I think that's probably a good place for me to stop and take a couple questions, and then maybe start running some sample combat encounters or like working through some sample character builds so that you can kind of get a sense of how a lot of these things actually play out in practice. One other thing I want to mention is movement. So one of the big new things in Crucible is we've moved to a 1 foot a 1 foot granularity grid. And so things like movement and your character size, your weapon reach, your range, template attacks you make, they all have this really high degree of precision because it's almost gridless in that like I can move in any direction. It's not just like north, south, east, west, or diagonal. I can move in pretty much any direction, and the final positioning of my character is going to be very precise, but it's not like so precise that I'm going to be like trying to, get a pixel perfect position of like, oh, I need to be 3 pixels away, not 2 pixels away. So it sort of reduces the choice a little bit of like where your character can stand, but you get a really huge flexibility in terms of like the sorts of moves you make. And as you see here, the ruler movement costs action, and so as I'm measuring out different distances, it's showing me like how many action it would take in order to make that particular move. that amount of action is deducted and played to chat as a move action when I enact it. And so, yeah, you get really great sort of tactical movement and positioning system, not to mention the amazing like engagement and flanking system that we have that I'm going to showcase more of as I show some combat encounters. So, yeah, the precision and the fidelity of the way that you move around and you explore the world is something that I'm quite happy with the arrangement that I've kind of converged on after quite a bit of testing. So, yeah, so amazing. I think there's so much more to show and to talk about, but let me take a couple of questions from chat, and then let's maybe like start by just, you know, talking through a character creation process, talking through a character build, running a sample combat encounter. I think those are things that will really help to solidify some of these ideas for you all. So some questions from chat. I10X asks, spellcasting was one of the major balance discussions in the last playtest. How's the new AP system helped spellcasters keep up with marshals in action economy? Good question. One of the interesting things, and maybe this is a little bit too technical to be the thing I go to next, so I might give a short answer here, and then I might try and give a longer answer later in the stream. But probably the most important thing that changed from playtest 1 to playtest 2, or I mean, I'm not actually calling this playtest 2, but like the new V12 version of playtest 1, we moved from a 3-action based system to a 6-action based system. So on one hand, that sounds like a lot more complexity, and in some ways it's a little bit more complex, but it's not actually that much more complex, because most actions that previously cost 1A now cost 2. Most actions that previously cost 3A now cost 4. But not always. The 6-action system gives us a lot more flexibility with those intervening non-even numbers. Like a 1-action ability is something super fast. A 3-action ability is sort of like a 1.5 times the 2-action ability. So you get that extra level of granularity where you can say, like, this spell is 3-action, not 2-action. It's a little bit slower to cast, but it's not twice as slow to cast. And that allows us to really, in a more nuanced way, shift the action economy a little bit, so that certain spells can, be like a 3-action spell is a little bit faster than like a 4-action, giant weapon swing. And so that's the short answer, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I think it's more like the action economy rebalance that gets to some of that stuff. Question from New One, where does Crucible lie in terms of resource management? Are there abilities that can be only used a certain number of times per specific time period, recharge, or is it more resourceless, or abilities more per encounter? So it's all resource based. So how much or when you can do something really entirely depends on, do you have the action, focus, or heroism to afford that action? If you have enough action, if you have enough focus, if you have enough heroism, you can do it. There's no actions that's like you can only use this 3 times, or there's no actions like you can use this but then it goes on like a 4-round cooldown and you can't do it again. I'm not going to say it's impossible that we would ever add something like that. It's possible that we would add certain actions that do have like a cooldown, but it's not currently part of the design. The current design is, if you can afford to do it, you can do it. Question from Liarin. A player of mine wanted to know if the system uses a bounded accuracy or similar system. So, yes and no. It does not use bounded accuracy in the sense that there is not a artificial ceiling imposed on, or an artificial floor imposed on like your potential to have a certain role. So we don't force a mechanic where like a lower level character can always have a certain chance of hitting a high level character. It is possible that accuracy delta becomes unbounded to a degree where like certain things are impossible. That being said, we've really tried to carefully craft the ramp of how much does that delta widen over the course of levels, so that a large group of low level adversaries can still pose some theoretical challenge to a group of higher level heroes. It's a nuanced thing, and it's going to require a lot of playtesting, but I guess the short answer is no, there's not bounded accuracy. But the longer answer is that some of the reasons why a game system might want bounded accuracy are reasons that we also want for Crucible's gameplay, and so we're looking for kind of different ways to make sure that is preserved. The spirit of that is preserved. Question from Shifter Seraph: why did you go with square grids with exact diagonals and not just use hexagons? Main reason for that, Shifter Seraph, is honestly a very aesthetic concern about the exploration of area maps. With hexagons, if you were walking down a hallway, depending on the direction of the hallway, your character would be like zigzagging every step, and they would be bigger hexagons. So you'd be like doop, doop, doop. It's very kind of like when you're on that off diagonal of the hex grid, it's very off-putting when it's supposed to be like a square hallway that you're just running back and forth into the walls every step. It also means that, a certain, diagonal actually works pretty well with the hex grid, but like a 45-degree diagonal hallway on an area map, you can't actually walk down that hallway because the hexes are, 60-degree rotational. So, for like an overland map or an outdoor wilderness map or a region map, I think a hex grid is wonderful. Hexes have phenomenal properties for that kind of gameplay, but for like a dungeon exploration experience, I think hexes they have some pretty significant drawbacks, and so a fine granularity square grid that allows you to, walk straight down a hallway or walk 45 degrees, in any direction, and moreover, with the fine granularity of it, really like walk in any direction in a straight line. I think like there's just a certain visual fidelity of that experience that for me was important to have. All right, I'm skipping down to the end of the chat log. I'll take another couple of questions, and then I want to showcase, sort of explain by showing a few things. Question from Zephyr: are there plans for additional Crucible adventures or content before Ember is fully released? No, we won't have time for that. I might tweak the playtest a little bit, like we might add some more rounds to the Crucible playtest. Ultimately, I hope we'll unlock our stretch goal of the Crucible beginner box, and that can be some Crucible content that we'll make, but there's not going to be time to make a Crucible adventure before Ember comes out. Question from Phantasm: with the updates to Crucible that happen along with the Ember Alpha and Beta development be public? Yes, so Crucible updates will be public. Using Crucible in Ember is going to require being part of the Ember playtest. How feasible is it to use Crucible system for a homebrew game world? Yes, it is intended to be extremely feasible to use Crucible for a homebrew game world, and Crucible makes it easy-ish to create, every single thing that you would need. So for example, I can create a custom ancestry, like we'll say like, Blood Elf, say I'm playing like a Warcraft-inspired game. You can configure the attributes of that ancestry, you can give it an icon, give it a description, and then it becomes ready to go to use on a character sheet. Similarly, with adversaries, we have a really rich system for adversary creation, and I'm going to show that to you all later in the stream when I have some time to make, maybe make a custom monster or something and show you what that process looks like. Question from Kayamsil: what is Ember's native system? Is it being balanced around 5e first or Crucible? At the moment, it's being balanced around 5e, but that's just a virtue of where we are in the pre-alpha development process of Ember. As Crucible becomes more ingrained with the way that we do development, that might shift, but I don't want to make guarantees on that. I think also in terms of Ember's development timeline, like we are committed that it's going to take longer to make Crucible plus Ember than it is going to make either Crucible or Ember separately or Ember for 5e. And so for people who've backed on Kickstarter, we want to make sure to deliver the 5e experience as quickly as possible. December of next year is what we've estimated, but hopefully we can hit that estimate. But we're going to really target delivering Ember for 5e as expediently as possible, and Crucible support is then going to come like when we feel it is fully ready and when we feel fully good about it. It is a layer of complexity on top of the complexity required to deliver a 5e product. I think, that maybe means, in answer to your question, that Ember is probably being balanced for 5e first. However, it can be quite easily rebalanced or improved upon from a balance perspective when we get into Crucible, because we have a lot more levers to pull with Crucible in terms of how balance works. And so, maybe the answer is sort of 5e first, but hopefully Crucible better from the balance perspective. Okay, let's show a few things. I'll take some more questions in a minute, but let's talk about character creation. Obviously, those of you who've seen Ember, you've seen the beautiful character creation process we have in Ember, and Crucible is going to integrate with that. So if you're playing Ember and you go to create a new protagonist, what's going to happen is that you're going to go, straight into the Ember character creation. But if you're just playing Crucible on its own as a system outside of Ember, then a new character has a sheet like this, at least at the moment in the playtest. Now, there's some character creation steps we need to do, and I get a tooltip here that tells me, exactly what I need to do in order to proceed. We're going to start by choosing an ancestry. Now, these ancestries are just examples. Crucible is not intended to be like a system, a setting, and so Crucible is intended to be setting agnostic. It's intended that you as a GM would use Crucible as an engine for whatever game setting you want to play. So these are like incredibly generic ancestries like Gnome. You would be expected to adapt these ancestries to your own game setting or to the game that you're playing. So if you're playing in Ember, these are going to be all of the Ember ancestries. These are just kind of some example ancestries as sort of generic placeholders to help people test out the Crucible system. So we'll choose our ancestry, we'll choose our background. Again, these are just kind of generic examples. You would be expected to make your own backgrounds and to set those up how you would want, or to play in a setting like Ember that provides a ton of, built-in background options. We'll be a Gnome Scholar. I get a starting talent from that. I get Intuit Weakness as my talent for being a Scholar. Then I'm going to invest in some initial ability scores. So I'll take some intellect, some toughness, a little dexterity, a little presence, a little wisdom, spreading myself around. I don't care about strength. I do want a little bit more presence, though. Maybe one more wisdom. No, we'll go 5 intellect. We'll push the intellect so we can do some good damage. So I've invested my ability scores. Next I need to spend skills. I get 2 skill points to use for starting out. I'm going to get a little more Arcana and maybe some Deception. And then we go into the talent tree, and I start out here with my new character. I've got my starting talent that came from my background. But from there, it's full freedom of choice for like, how am I going to build this character? What do I want to invest in? Now, there's some things that I can't buy, like I can't buy these strength talents because I didn't invest in strength at character creation. So I don't meet the prerequisites for these strength talents. I don't meet the prerequisites for these wisdom talents. I didn't take enough wisdom. I did invest into intellect and to presence and to dexterity and a little bit of toughness. So I've got a lot of things that I can choose from, but I can't choose anything because I don't meet the prerequisites for many things. I think I'm going to make this a spellcaster, so I'm going to take the Rune of Flame so that I know fire magic, and then I'm going to take the arrow gesture so that I have a ranged expression of that magic that I can use. So there is all of my character creation steps. I've done that, and I'm going to put my protagonist character down here, and I can maybe pull a token or something. We'll see if I've got some. I'll just grab one of Kaora's character tokens here. We'll do wizard. Yeah, I'll just use this little guy. Okay, so one of the things to note here is my gnome is size 3, so I occupy a 3x3 grid space with this character that I've just made. That is important because other creatures might be larger. For example, like this giantkin ancestry next to me is a 5x5 grid space. So different creature sizes have a mechanical meaning, and the 1-foot subgrid means that we can have a lot of like nuanced precision between the, you know, the size 3, the size 4, and the size 5. We're not just doubling in size with each additional size increment. We're just incrementing in size a little bit with each additional size increment. So there's some nice nuance that we get there as a result of the 1-foot grid. Now, if I were attacking a adversary, so suppose I'm fighting against this skeletal archer with the, you know, the fire caster that I've just made, if I were to put those two characters into a combat encounter, and I'll then begin that encounter, it's going to roll initiative for both combatants, and I get in chat, I get a little report card that tells me, what was the result of the initiative roll. Actually, it looks like I've got some text wrapping issue there I need to fix. Suppose that it's my protagonist's turn. Let's show an example of what Spellcraft looks like in Crucible. So if I want to cast a spell, and I'll mark that as a favorite action so that it appears here in my sidebar. When I want to cast a spell, I am going to compose that spell by selecting a rune and selecting a gesture. Now, as a level 1 character here, I don't know too many different runes. I only know flame at the moment, and I only know either touch or arrow. Well, I'm too far away to touch, so I'm going to do a flame arrow. And when I cast this flame arrow at the skeleton archer, it's going to do a dice pool roll using my ability bonus, skill bonus, enchantment bonus. Unfortunately, I missed, so my flame arrow goes wide. And it cost me some action, it cost me some focus. I could repeat that spell again if I had action and focus left. I'll try it again. We'll try another flame arrow. Missed again. So I'm not able to hit this skeleton this turn. I've been foiled in my endeavor. Advance to round 2 of initiative, and it's important to note that initiative gets restacked. So when we get to round 2, I'm actually going first this time, where in round 1 I was second. So the restacking of initiative each round of combat is something that introduces a lot of, I think, desirable unpredictability and tactical challenge into the flow of combat. I think one of the things that I really don't like with many established systems is that, like, once you know where you are in initiative order, you kind of fall into a routine in combat. Like, oh, I always go after the cleric, and so like the cleric's gonna do their thing, and then I'm gonna do my thing, and I always go before this enemy, so like I just need to like move a little bit away from them so that I'm out of range for their ability. Knowing what, that sort of routine of combat is something that I don't particularly enjoy, and so the reshuffling of initiative each round is something that I think is a lot of fun and introduces a lot of refreshing tactical challenge to Crucible that keeps things a little bit, keeps things moving, and it keeps things interesting and a little bit more, I wouldn't say spontaneous, because initiative is determined by your abilities and by your, by your boons, by your certain talents that you have. So like, it is possible for a character to be predictably good at initiative or predictably bad at initiative, so it's not like completely random. But I think it's something that I really enjoy. I'm gonna try one more time to land a spell. I'm gonna cheat as a GM, and I'm gonna give myself some boons so that I have a little bit better probability of hitting. Here we go. This looks good. Yeah, so I surpassed their reflex defense, and my fire arrow slams into this skeleton and almost kills it with a single blow. Now, of course, I'm burning through my focus pretty quickly here. So what I might do in this round of combat is that since I have 2 action left, I could use my 2 action recover focus ability. Instead of casting another spell, I'll recover focus, and I spend my 2 actions to recover some focus points instead. So, you know, it's just like a quick example of Spellcraft, a quick example of some of the basic mechanics. I think what we should do is run a slightly larger combat encounter so that we get a little bit more examples of how some different characters work and feel. So I'm going to pick 4 of my playtest pre-gen heroes. I'll get rid of all of these. We'll go with the Archer, maybe the two-handed sort of Berserker type, the Rogue, and maybe the Fire Caster. So I've got my heroes here. I'm going to play through the first challenge of the playtest gauntlet, and I think it'll be a good example of... Now, of course, I'm going to be playing both sides, so I'm going to be sort of playing against myself, and to a degree that's going to make things go faster. But I think it can still be a good example of, like, once you know your way about the system, this will be a good example of how fast-paced combat can be and how lively it can be. Because usually, like, you say, like, oh, I'm going to run a combat encounter on this stream, and you're all thinking, okay, cool, I'll, you know, check back in 2.5 hours and we'll still be doing it. You'll see that it's going to go much faster than that. Yeah, so I'll run this Feral Scramble encounter, but before I kick it off, I'll take some more questions from chat and see what folks would like to know that I can answer for you before I do like a demo, you know, a demo combat. Okay, I've got my combat set up, so I'll wait to start it until after answering a couple of questions. Question from Zephyr: with initiative re-rolling every round, how does that interact with until your next turn type of effects, or are those generally non-existent? There are effects that last until your next turn, and to a certain extent, the unpredictability of exactly when your next turn will be is part of what's factored into the balance and the design of those types of effects. Kamatikos: total reroll of initiative has the potential for players effectively to not have a turn for almost 2 rounds. That is true, but that's offset by the fact that it means you went first on 1 round, and therefore you had the luxury of going before everyone else. That's a plus. The fact that you're going last on the next round, yeah, that's a bummer, but the pace of combat in Crucible is what should make that tolerable. The fact that you're not waiting 40 minutes for your turn to come back around, you're just waiting, you know, 6 or 7 minutes for your turn to come back around. Even if you happen to be last in initiative order next round, it's not quite as awful. Question from Mute Foxy: what are the stats and what do they actually do? Abilities. Yeah, good question. I should have explained this in a little bit more detail. So there are 6 ability scores in Crucible. 3 of them represent your physical attributes, and 3 of them represent mental attributes. So the physical attributes are the left column: strength, toughness, dexterity. The mental attributes are wisdom, presence, and intellect. Now, moreover, in addition to there being 3 physical and 3 mental, there are 2 each of sort of power attributes, 2 each of stamina attributes, and 2 each of quickness attributes. So strength and wisdom are respectively, for physical and mental, the power attributes that thematically correspond to kind of like the brute force approach. Toughness and presence are kind of hardiness or stamina type attributes that reflect your physical durability as well as your mental durability. Dexterity and intellect are quickness of body and quickness of thought, attributes, and so those are the quickness attributes. And on the talent tree, the quadrants of the talent tree are arrayed in that way. So on the left side, you have strength and wisdom. North-south, you have presence and toughness. And then on the right side, you have intellect and dexterity. So some of the talents, like on the right side, for example, like preternatural instinct, or anticipate harm, or artful parry, or focused anticipation, these are the types of talents that have to do with the theme of like being fast to react, fast to think, predictive, anticipatory. Whereas talents on the left side of the tree in the kind of strength and wisdom quadrant is more about like being forceful. So, a smite or a stunning strike, or, strong grip, or a grappling, or, deflection type talents. So, and then of course presence and toughness have a little bit more about sort of survivability, withstanding harm. You'll see more examples when I show more builds that invest in those quadrants. So that's a quick definition of the 6 ability scores that Crucible uses. It's true, they are not quadrants, they are hexants. But quadrants is a little bit of an easier word to use because people understand what you mean. Question from Summeraz. How do skills outside combat work? Are they able to cover most player actions? Like if they want to investigate terrain and see if someone is lying, etc. Good question. So something like investigation of terrain would very likely use the wilderness skill, but it could also use awareness. It could also use some aspect of science if like assessing the viability of a certain structure or substance was involved. Detecting whether someone is lying, it could be awareness, and there is a specialization under awareness called prescient, which is specifically related to this. But it also, one of the things that we do a little bit in Crucible is that you can also contest with the same skill. So you could contest deception with your own deception, like, recognize, game recognizes game, or like recognizes like. If you are particularly good with deception, you could counter someone's attempt to deceive you using your own deception ability. So there are different options, and part of the social challenge system, or part of the exploration challenge system that's going to be coming in a later playtest, involves you kind of playing that rock, paper, scissors game of like choosing which skill you're going to use to try and counter, some other challenge or some other skill. Coffee sip. All right, let's play out the sample combat, and Jared asks, is there going to be something like a strength plus strength skill? No, every skill requires 2 different ability scores, so none of these skills is sort of monolithic in terms of like you can scale it only using strength or only using intellect. Every skill has 2 ability scores that it depends on and scales with, and that's an intentional design to add more nuance and balance to the system. Okay, let's play out this combat encounter. Someone says, I'm pretty sure that's not what Jared asked. Maybe I misunderstood. Sorry, Jared, if that's the case. Okay, let's play out this combat encounter. So the scenario here is that the 4 heroes in the center of the arena are challenged on 2 different sides. There's 4 of these wild boar called Bizaz that emerge from this tunnel, and there's 4 of these ravenous hyena creatures that emerge from the left side of the map. So I've got them all in initiative. We're going to go ahead and kick it off. We begin combat, and there's going to be a huge amount of dice rolls. We get our initiative report card in chat that tells us how everybody did, and we'll go ahead and jump in. So the hyena here that is the fastest to react. Now, this hyena is a minion. So this is something I can show quickly about the adversary scaling. Adversaries can scale up and down in level, and as they do, they get stronger. There's built-in scaling built directly into it, so you can really easily nudge the difficulty of your adversaries up or down. Each adversary can also have a rank, minion, normal, elite, or boss. And also, minion, normal, elite, or boss also automatically scales the stats, the resource pools, and therefore all of the damage and everything that these creatures do. So these Hyana are level 1/2 minions, so they're relatively weak, and so a pack of 4 of them should be, you know, well, there's 8 in total because there's 4 of those and there's 4 of these. So 8 of these, you know, level 1/2 minions should be a difficult but not deadly challenge for a party of 4 players. So we'll see if the players can persevere here or if they get eaten. The Hyana is the first to react. It has 4 action. It's going to have to spend a lot of move. It's not going to be patient, though. It's going to just go ahead and charge straight in, spending all 4 AP to get into combat. So that's its turn done. Belladonna is our rogue. They are going to want to take advantage of flanking and working with allies. So Belladonna's going to use one AP of movement to get onto the far side of this Hyana. Now, one thing you notice when that happened is the creature automatically became flanked. We can see using our flanking calculator here, visualization of like how flanking happens. This creature is flanked because it is engaged with both Ulfen and Belladonna. So coming in here, spending an action to get into position, Belladonna has 6 action left, or 5 action left, so we're going to actually do a flurry, which is kind of a big hitter on a single target, so this is a perfect time to use that ability. It's going to make 4 attacks in a flurry of blows against a single target, so we'll unleash that. A lot of dice that gets rolled. I get a boon to each of those dice because the creature's flanked, and so I actually landed 3 of those hits, and Belladonna has completely killed this creature with that flurry of blows. Next up is the Baisaz, which is going to come in and get into a position to charge. It's going to have to spend all 4 AP, but it's going to get up on top of the archer Eliorwen here. Again, the Hyana, 4 AP, they're going to charge in here and try and get at Belladonna now that Belladonna is isolated from the group. It's going to kind of get around, and now Belladonna is the one that's flanked as these Hyana are charging in to get into the mix. Now Belladonna is actually flanked too. So flanked is not just on or off, but it's a degree of effect. So flanked 2 is happening because there are 3 enemies engaged with Belladonna, and that exceeds Belladonna's engagement score by 2. So every character has an engagement score. Belladonna can only engage 1 enemy at a time, but someone who's a little bit more defensive, like someone who has a shield or a tank, would have an engagement score greater than 1, and therefore be able to simultaneously engage multiple foes. But Belladonna is not that, so they are now flanked too, which it could be trouble. The Baisaz over here is going to charge in. Again, kind of getting in with Eliorwen, getting a flanking action going. Similarly, spending all their action here to get into melee. I need to space these out just slightly. Whoops, there we go. Zaraja is our fire caster. So the enemies have all come in, but one of them has already been put down. Zaraja has... what runes and gestures does Zaraja have? Flame, Touch, Influence, Mage Staff. Just refreshing my memory on what actions are available to this character. Okay, Flame Touch is probably the strongest thing, and Flame Touch targets Reflex. So Zaraja's going to be clever and probably intuit that the hyenas are likely more dexterous than the boars. So with a fire spell that targets Reflex, we're going to go for one of the boars. So Zaraja comes here and reinforces Eliorwen, and then is going to cast a spell and do Flame Influence, which is a big sort of single target touch-based damage spell. Flaming Influence is successful in dealing damage to the boar. Zaraja has 2 action left. It's enough to cast a quick touch spell, so we'll do a Flame Touch, which only costs 2 action instead of 3, and see if Zaraja can finish off the creature. In fact, it does. Critical hit. This boar is killed by the caster. All right. Now the boar's turn is going to get here and get into charging range, and then we'll use the defend action to prepare to tusk charge next turn. Eliorwen. Now, as you notice with the defend action, that became an active effect on the creature. Lasts 2 rounds, gives a bane to attacks against it. So Eliorwen is flanked by these 2 creatures, wants to use her bow. I'll have Eliorwen do sort of a stupid thing so that I can show you what might happen if she did. Suppose she uses her action to move away from these boars to get range again. What that would entail is that she's moved out of their engagement range, and so they're able to use a reactive strike if they had the action suitable to do it. However, since these boars spent all their action and haven't recovered it yet, Eliorwen is able to do that to get away without the threat of being attacked as she withdraws. So now, having spent free movement on withdrawing, and that's something I should point out, that every character has 1 unit of free movement every turn, and that's to make sure that combat can feel fluid and that positioning in combat is meaningful. Like if you need to nudge your position up or down a few squares, you have a free movement every combat, every round that you can use to do that. Eliorwen will target the remaining boar that looks like it's going to try and charge down Zaraja, and Eliorwen's going to try and do a pinning shot in order to pin it in place so that it becomes restrained and cannot move. It's a glancing blow, so did not surpass the boar's physical defense, but did roll well enough to deal some glancing damage nonetheless. She'll try again because she really wants to stop this boar from charging, and she has sufficient action to do it, but that is a miss. That arrow goes wide, no effect. All right, Ulfin, our slow but powerful berserker friend here, is going to survey the battlefield and think that these hyena are the biggest threat as Belladonna is now surrounded. Ulfin would really like to use a cleave, so we're going to try and get into range to do that. So using free action to move in, Ulfin's going to use a whole 6 action, the entire action economy that Ulfin has on a cleave template. Oh, it's not going to quite... Nope, I think I can clip it. All right, so I get both hyena in my cleave because this great axe has range 3, which is really quite good reach. So with this cleave attack, I'm able to swipe and hit 2 of them. And one of them hits, one of them misses. So the one closest to Ulfin takes that damage. Okay, so that's the end of round 1. So now what happens at the end of round 1 is that the initiative order is going to get restacked. So we'll continue to the next turn, and we get a new initiative report for the round that has reshuffled the order on us. And of course, Ulfin is happy because now they're not last anymore. Now the hyena here is going to attack Belladonna for sure because it has, as one of its main features, it has this pack hunter that gives it an additional boon when attacking any flanked target. So it's really good at working with its allies to attack a flanked enemy. So it's going to make 2 strike attacks against Belladonna with its bite. There's the first one. First one is a glancing blow, only 1 point of damage. Second one, also a glancing blow, only 2 points of damage. Belladonna got a little bit lucky there. Next up, the Baizaz here is going to try and charge down Eliorwin with a Tusk Charge. So it's going to charge in a straight line, striking Eliorwin, and... oh, just being dodged. Okay, this is an important example of the physical defense. So the attack roll was a 16, lower than Eliorwin's physical defense of 17, and that resulted in a dodge. How did that result in a dodge? Well, if we look at Eliorwin's character sheet, you see that physical defense is broken down into multiple categories. There is armor, which is kind of your protective garb, physical armor. There is dodge, your ability to, step or roll or evade out of the way. Parry, which you can do if you have weapons equipped that are suitable for parrying blows. Or block, if you have a shield or quarterstaff or some other item equipped that's suitable for blocking. Now, block is sort of like parry, but there is a distinction, an intentional distinction between the two. So, anyways, this particular attack was dodged by Eliorwin rather than defended with armor. Now, that is an internal randomization that occurred based on the relative probabilities of an armor-based defense or a dodge-based defense. So whenever a physical attack is averted or avoided, Crucible tells you how that physical attack was averted. So as we scroll back up in the chat log, we'll see that, like, oh, this one was dodged. This one was a glancing blow against armor. This one was dodged. This one was dodged, etc. All right, so the Baizaz charged down Eliorwin, but was unable to knock her over. It's going to save its remaining action. It's Ulfin's turn. Now Ulfin feels like he can get a big cleave in, so he's going to do cleave again. He's going to spend free movement to get up and flank around these hyena a little bit, and using another cleave, get these two again in a broad swing of his great axe. Oh, shit. That was a misplay on my part. And so I didn't notice when I was placing the template, but that Ulfin actually caught Belladonna, his ally, in that cleave. Now, I could say, oh, you did it. That's, you made that mistake. Poor play. You're punished for it. You hit your ally. Or you could be a generous GM and say, oh, you're just learning the system. So, maybe double check your targets before you actually commit your cleave. If I were a generous DM, I would say, I'm not going to confirm that attack. I'm going to cancel that attack. So Ulfin hasn't actually spent action yet. Ulfin could revert the free move, and we could say, we're going to move to here instead. Oops, I undid one too many. So Ulfin stands a little bit further back, which means that cleave is going to hit just the hyena and not the ally. So, you have obviously a GM responsible for interpreting, and the GM confirmation workflow is really an important part of the system. So this cleave, I can see here, one of the hyena dodged the effect, and one of them was hit by it. So unlucky for Ulfin that the one that was hit and the one that dodged was the one that was already damaged. So no kills this turn, but good amount of damage dealt. Then it becomes Belladonna's turn. Belladonna's flanked by 3 hyena. It's perhaps a dangerous situation, so Belladonna's going to try and fight their way out of it, targeting the one that's already weakened. We'll do a dagger-based single strike. It's only 2 actions. A dagger is a very close range but fast weapon. I can strike with a dagger, just 2 action. It's very, very cheap to do, a dagger strike. So here's a dagger strike. It's a glancing blow. It hits but does not finish the job. So we can do an offhand strike against the same target using the dual wield feature. It's a miss. Unlucky. We'll keep attacking because we need to kill some of these hyena. That looks good. That's a big hit. It's going to finish the job on this one, and can turn to the second one and make a final offhand strike. So 4 total attacks this round, all done very quickly. No fuss, just a couple of seconds, and Belladonna has had a really heroic feeling action first, turn of like doing a lot of things, 4 different attack rolls. So even at level 1, you get to feel sort of like a big hero where you can do a lot of things in combat. It's not like, oh, here's my one roll, I missed, okay, come back to me in 20 minutes. You get your moment on the stage, and you get a really generous amount of action economy to, to do some things with. All right, Zaraja is going to reinforce Eliorwen by moving in and flanking the Baizaz, which then sets it up for a influence, a flame influence touch-based damage spell. Pretty good roll. 18 points of fire damage is enough to kill this minion creature. The surviving Hyana will attack Belladonna, who is no longer flanked. So it's kind of on its own now. It's going to rotate around a little bit to try and get away from Ulfin, but it will strike twice at Belladonna. That's a hit, and another hit, 4 damage each. I was hoping to threaten these heroes a little bit more with my sample combat, but the rolls have gone against these creatures a bit. Eliorwen will target the boar that is not yet engaged. We'll do a pinning shot, try and pin it in place. That looks successful. Good. Okay, I wanted to demo something like this. So when the pinning shot goes in, it automatically applies that active effect to the creature. The active effect of the pinning shot that was automatically applied to it as part of making that attack roll, it lasts 2 turns, and it applies the restrained condition. So when we get to that creature's turn, we would see movement is now impossible for this creature. It's restrained, so our measurement system knows that. It knows that it can't move. It is stuck in place. And it will be until it shakes off that effect. The remaining boar here is 19 feet away, so it's going to use a free movement to get into range, and then it's going to use a tusk charge against Zaraja as it charges in a line straight into Zaraja. Glancing blow, so it does not knock the caster down, it just deals a glancing strike. Top of the round, round 3, Hyana goes first. It's attacking Belladonna again. It hits, dealing 5 more points of damage, and then 6 more points of damage, and that actually brings Belladonna to 0 health. So Belladonna has been reduced to 0 by this Hyana on round 3 of combat. Belladonna does not fall down, does not go unconscious. Belladonna is now weakened, though, and any further damage that Belladonna suffers is going to go directly to wounds. So Belladonna is out of health, and so any further physical damage that is suffered is going to go directly to wounds. If your wounds fill up, if Belladonna were to reach maximum wounds, Belladonna would permanently die. So there's no bouncing back and forth between consciousness. There are other effects in the system that might render you unconscious, but once you enter this weakened state, you are particularly vulnerable. Belladonna's action economy is reduced from 6 to 4. She can take fewer actions on her turn, and any damage that she suffers is going to accumulate lasting wounds. So it's not a good situation to be in. The Baisaz down here is going to strike Zaraja twice. And one of those is a hit, one of them is a miss. Zaraja is then going to try and end this creature with a influence of flame. Zaraja is getting a little bit low on focus, though. Oof, that attack misses, so should we spend our last focus point? I think so. The battle is tipping a little bit, and Zaraja sees the opportunity to end it, so we're going to do our last focus point. Yes, critical hit, 19 points of fire damage. Huge hit, ends that creature, although Zaraja is now out of focus for the rest of the encounter unless Zaraja spends some action recovering focus. Eliorwen, the archer, has this boar pinned and is now going to try and finish it off with a strike shot from her longbow. That doesn't look like it's going to do it, though. That is dodged. We'll do one more strike. We've got the action to shoot again. That looks better. Ah, no, still dodged. She can't take care of business. Belladonna, who is wounded, or is weakened, has reduced action economy, but is going to try and fight their way out of this bad situation. 2 action strike. That's not going to do it. And then a 1 action offhand strike. Hopefully. Yes, successful. 5 points of damage. Not enough to kill the creature, though. So Belladonna is in some difficult circumstances. No way to spend the final action except perhaps distract. But distract is not useful at this point in time. Ulfen is going to come to the rescue. Free action to move into a flanking position. Notice, importantly, that flanking doesn't have to be opposite. So both of these allies, face on, 2-on-1, it is still flanking. So you can imagine if you're outnumbered, you're attacking 2 people at a time. The second one doesn't have to be behind you for you to be flanked. Your engagement is surpassed by the number of creatures. Yeah, Ulfin's not going to use cleave this time. We're going to do just a single target strike with the Great Axe. And that looks successful. 12 points of damage is going to end this creature for sure. The Hyena falls down dead. The Baizaz is the solitary foe that remains, but it can't move because it's pinned to the ground. So all it can do is take the defend action to try and survive. And then next turn. You notice that at the top of the round, the pinned effect on the Baizaz automatically expired. So it was pinned for that round, but once we get to the start of the next round, no longer pinned. Zaraja is first to act, so we'll move in, free action, target. Can't cast a spell yet, so we'll do a recover focus first and get 2 focus points back, and then cast our spell. Hits 13 fire damage, and that puts down the creature. So that's the end of this combat encounter. All of the adversaries have been slain. I didn't do a very good job as the DM to really threaten the party. I did bring Belladonna down to the weakened condition, but didn't inflict any permanent wounds. So it's actually quite a good success for the party that came away from this encounter completely unscathed, at least unscathed from permanent harm. Once outside of combat, Belladonna can use the recover action to restore those short-term resources of health and morale and action. But if Belladonna had suffered some wounds, those wounds would eventually persist. So there was a quick example of running a whole combat encounter. Obviously, I was going through it a little bit quickly, but I mean, I didn't actually time myself. I don't know exactly what time I started, but it was probably around 25 minutes or so of time, which I think is, pretty good in terms of pacing and in terms of like the amount of, sort of capacity for heroic action that different characters have during the flow of combat. And so, the action economy is very generous. The restacking of initiative lends some unpredictability to the way that things go. And of course, this is just a level 1 combat. So once you level up and you have a lot more actions to choose from, a lot more talents at your disposal, your enemies are a lot tougher. There's an enemy, later in I think the single toughest enemy in the playtest is Koi Rent. Spoiler alert, but there's a werewolf enemy that you face as a single boss. And this is a level 7 boss that has 192 hit points and 10 action points per turn and like all of these sort of devastating features. And so, obviously complexity of the combat encounter is going to ramp up as you, get higher level and as you face tougher enemies. But hopefully this was a good little example that gave a bit of a tutorialized look at how the flow of combat in Crucible goes. All right, let's take some questions about like what of what you just saw stood out to you. What gave you questions that you'd like to know more about? What can I explain in more detail? All right, a question. Adrian Parsons, is the flanking distance or range always 1 foot? There might be a talent, an advanced talent high in the tree that allows you to expand the size of your engagement rectangle. There's currently no talents that do that. Currently, in order to be engaged with an enemy, you are in base to base with them, no matter what the reach of your weapon is. So for example, like, if this Hyana is healed back to full, in order to actually flank that creature, Ulfin needs to get into base to base with it. If Ulfin were further back from base to base, he could be, because Ulfin actually has a range of 3 on his two-handed weapon. He can attack from a distance, but if he's attacking from a distance like that, it would not cause the flanking effect. Now, if I take 1 step back even, so that I'm 4 away, it's a good chance to show that the chat card here on Strike actually does give you informative feedback. It shows you that your target here is outside of your maximum range. Like, it won't let me make that strike attack because I'm out of range to do it. So there's a lot of like internal automation like that that gives you information and protects you from doing a misplay. For example, if there were 2 Hyana here, suppose Ulfin targets both of them, and then I try and do a strike, it's going to tell me here, you may only designate up to 1 single target for strike. So like, it won't let me use this action if I have 2 creatures targeted instead of the correct number of creatures targeted. So there's a lot of automation around things like that to assert that the conditions that are required in order to do a particular action are met. Now, let's talk about supporting your ally so that they don't get flanked. This is something that I think is super cool. So suppose there's 3 Hyana here, and Belladonna is flanked 2 as a result. If Ulfin is opposite one of these Hyana, you notice that it doesn't get flanked. Why doesn't it get flanked? Well, it doesn't get flanked because it has allies supporting it in this encounter. There's 2 enemies, yes, but its engagement is now 3 instead of 1 because it is supported by allies that share mutual targets in common. So the positioning here really matters in terms of the tactical disposition of the battlefield. So like, Ulfin is flanked here and Belladonna is flanked here, but they're no longer flanking this Hyana because the Hyana is bolstered, is reinforced by its allies. So what happens if Ulfin actually walks around and gets shoulder to shoulder with Belladonna? Suddenly, Belladonna's flanking condition reduces from flanked 2 down to just flanked 1, because now Ulfin is helping to share some of the load that Belladonna is facing. Belladonna's engagement is increased to 2 because Ulfin, the ally, is there sharing part of the engagement with them. So this sort of shared engagement and like allies reinforcing you is really powerful, and it's super tactical, and it's something I'm very proud of. If Ulfin were to take just a step back, you know, it's no longer helping in that way. So Ulfin has to be sort of shoulder to shoulder with Belladonna in order to kind of make that phalanx and, you know, aid your allies with that tactical positioning, you know, to reinforce. Yeah, shield wall, exactly. All right, let me take another couple questions. Question from SD Shannon S. Can you talk about the challenges involved in using the Crucible system with a group that insists on rolling physical dice? I'm not sure. I think that would be very onerous. Foundry, of course, supports configuring dice. So, like, I could configure these, D8, D6, D4, D10, D12. I could configure these all to be manual input. And that is something that Foundry now supports, but when Belladonna comes up to do say a flurry attack against this hyena, it's just going to be like a lot of dice to punch in. 3, 3, 2, 4, 8, 7, 4, 3, 1, 7, and I'm just making up numbers here. Like, if these were actual rolls being done, I think it would really bring the pace of combat to quite a crawl. There's a lot of dice involved in the sorts of actions that transpire in Crucible, and so, like, rolling dice manually isn't really part of the design. Now, it is possible, and so if your group is content for combat to slow so that you get the satisfaction of rolling every individual physical die, then you can do it. It just, I think the pacing of combat will suffer a bit because it's going to be a lot of rolling that's going to really slow things down. Question from Mute Foxy. With this grid system, it seems hard to determine whether or not two tokens are overlapping. Yes, that is a good call out. I am 100% going to do something to make that better. So, like, when I'm moving a token around, I'm going to visualize the bounding boxes of the enemies, or I'm going to add some, like, collision testing, or, like, I'm 100% going to make that better. I recognize that that's a flaw in the current framework. You need to be able to know what are the hitboxes of these enemies so that you can quickly and accurately position yourself where you intend to be. A question from Brimcon. If you have all 4 defenses, how does it determine if you dodge versus parry versus block versus armor? Great question. Let's pull out a character that has all of those defenses. So here's like a level 6 character, Durath. Now I need to get a little bit of parry, so I can get some parry in multiple ways, but the simplest way is, let me get like a parrying weapon, like a sai or something, and I'll equip that instead of my Warhammer. Sai is only parry 1, so it's a sort of a trivial amount of parry. But now my stat line for Durath looks like I've got 14 armor, 4 dodge, 1 parry, and 2 block. So I've only got a little bit of the non-armor defenses. But the percentages of those defenses, so I've got a 19% chance to dodge, I've got a 5% chance to parry, I've got a 10% chance to block, and I've got a 67% chance to defend with my armor. Now, if I were a much more dodge-heavy character, like a sort of monk kind of evasion-based build, then you would be much more likely to dodge and much less likely to use armor to defend. So it's the proportional likelihood of your defensive makeup that affects, is the result a dodge, or is the result an armor defense, or is the result a parry? Yeah, it's weighted by your defensive composition. So there's like a hidden internal randomization as part of the attack roll, where if the roll misses, it then applies that uniform weight across weighted it applies the weight of your different defense categories to determining the probabilistic outcome of the attack. Let's see. Question from Dregory Term: Will Crucible support non-square creatures? Possibly. Currently, I'm keeping it simple and just doing squares. I wouldn't rule it out, but like, it's just a degree of complexity that isn't super important right now for where the system is. So I'm just keeping things simple and making everything square at the moment. Question from Zephyr: with how heavily automated the combat is, what systems are planned or in place already for creating custom homebrew abilities to make sure they gel with the rest of the automation? Great question. This will be a sort of slightly longer answer, but let's make an ability. Let's make an action. That would be fun to do. So I'm going to design a talent or a weapon. So there's multiple places that you can get an action from. It could be that a weapon has an action associated with it, or a talent does. Why don't we do a custom weapon? Let's do like a magic weapon. Let's do... Okay, let's make this guy Durath. Let's make him a magic warhammer. All right, so I'm going to import a base warhammer. So here's the basic warhammer weapon. Now, I've got a public description, secret description's GM only, public description, configuration tab. I've got all these different things I can set for the warhammer. Let's upgrade the quality of the item. So quality of the item affects its kind of material quality, its craftsmanship, the quality of the materials it's made from, as well as the workmanship of how that work was done. Items can be shoddy, standard, fine, superior, or masterwork. A shoddy item actually deals like less damage. Increasing the quality of the item is going to increase the base damage that it deals when it lands a hit. So we'll make this a fine. No, you know what? We'll make this a superior quality item. We'll also give it like a minor magical enchantment, which gives us a bonus to our attack roll with this item. And yeah, we'll leave it there for now. And you know, I could talk about price scaling as well. This is a cool thing. When an item has a base price, as it becomes progressively more enchanted, or as it has additional affixes to it that increase its value, there's an automatically computed price for the item, so you don't ever have to guess how much your magic item would be worth. The system will tell you as the GM what the price of this, you know, legendary masterwork warhammer would be. I think, you know, the scaling formula of that is likely to evolve over time, but I think that's something that I think is pretty cool. Okay, so now let's add an action to it. So obviously, without any special action, this warhammer can be used just to make a strike. Like, you can attack with it without it needing a special action. But let's add an action to it. All right, chat, you've got to help me. What kind of thing should this magic warhammer do? I'm kind of thinking like you smash it into the ground and there's like an explosion of kinetic energy that like knocks everything backwards. Ground pound. Makes enemy prone. Okay, I've got some good ideas here. All right. You know, you slam... we need a name for this item, too. So, chat, help me out with the item name. You slam your weapon into the ground, knocking enemies prone. Earthbreaker. Earthbreaker is quite good. Okay. Maybe this should be fortitude defense or reflex defense or physical defense. What should the defense against this be? I was sort of thinking fortitude, maybe to stand your ground, but it could be other things. Reflex. People saying reflex. I'm seeing a little bit of both. All right, so we've got a description of this item. We'll call this break earth. We'll name the action. So the item can be Earthbreaker. The action will be break earth. Just so you see how the how that... Ooh, is that a bug? There, I don't know what was happening there. It's alpha. There might be bugs. Okay, so we've got a description, we've got an action. Okay, let's go to the usage tab. So now we need to define what is this action going to cost to use. And there's a couple of options here. You can explicitly say how much action, focus, or heroism it requires. You can also have it add your base weapon cost. So I think that probably makes sense here. Why don't we have it add the weapon cost? And why don't we make this a heroism spender? Or I'll make it a focus spender for now so that we can test it more easily, but this could be an interesting thing to be like a heroism ability. We'll come back to that. Okay, action tags. This defines a lot of behaviors of the action. So we would say it's going to be a main hand attack. So in terms of like the action that you'll take, you're going to make a main hand attack. It's going to target reflex, so we need to set the defense type of it as reflex. I don't think we need to set anything else up here. I think we'll leave it at that for now, just main hand reflex. Target, we wanted this to be a cone, so we'll make this a cone attack of size, let's say 10 feet. You could either specify a size or you could make it based on the weapon's range. Or you could, there's lots of things you can do, but we'll say it affects all creatures within a 10-foot cone. Now we'll say it adds an effect. I think people wanted it to knock people prone, so we'll add an effect that says, the break earth effect, it's going to inflict the prone status for 1 turn. Or I guess until they stand up, so we don't need to set a duration. It will make you prone until you stand back up. And there we go. We've got a break earth action on this item. So now let's give our magic hammer to Durath. We'll equip it. And now once I've got that equipped, I see in my actions tab, I've got the break earth action that is here under this. Now actually I realize now I should give it the melee tag, because that has some requirement checking involved that we would want to be here. So I'll give it the melee tag, and so now it appears as an attack action. Okay, let's get some targets for me to test this out against. Suppose these creatures are like coming at me and it's my turn in combat. We're going to test this out and see how it goes. So Durath is going to try out the Break Earth special feature on this custom magic warhammer we just made. So I'm going to use my Break Earth action, and it prompts me to place a template. So there I get to say, like, here's my cone of earth-breaking power, and I'll just slam it and hit all of these hyena. So here comes the damage roll. I've hit 3 of them, and 1 of them was able to resist with reflex. It's actually killed a few of them because these are really weakened minions, but each of the ones that was hit got affected with the Break Earth persistent effect, so that they're now prone. So for example, this creature that's prone, if it doesn't have a free move anymore, it would have to spend its move action to stand up from prone. So I'll show you how that works. I'll advance to the turn of the hyena that is prone. On its turn, because it's prone, it doesn't have a free move anymore. It can spend a move action, and by spending the move action, the prone condition goes away. So it had to spend a move action to stand up. So yeah, there's a little demo of how that would work. Yeah, we've designed a custom magic item. We've given it a custom action. Of course, you could have a talent that does this. It's a very similar process for iconic spells. Designing iconic spells would follow a very similar process. And if you want to get really fancy about having any sort of effect that this thing has, like honestly anything you can imagine, that's where hooks come in. And hooks are quite advanced ways to program very customized effects. Like each action can basically have what amounts to sort of like built-in macros that can programmatically define certain behaviors to make the action work exactly the way you need it to if the built-in options don't quite suffice. So there's an example, but yeah, building custom actions, custom talents, custom iconic spells, custom magic items, everything has an interface that allows you to do that. Like if I were to make a custom iconic spell, it would follow very much the same process. Like we want to make I'll just show one that I already have made. I made one as an example called Protective Mirage. It's kind of a low-key rip-off of like a 5e mirror image. A iconic spell is very similar. Like you have to know certain spellcraft knowledge in order to unlock it, and then it gives you an action, and that action works using the same sort of action configuration. Now this is an example of a place where, you know, I would have to use some hooks, some custom code in order for the Protective Mirage to apply the effects correctly the way that I want it to. But these hooks can allow for like very advanced special things that have really sophisticated features. I don't know does my talent tester character have this Protective Mirage? Yeah, it does. I've got a character here. I'll make them a spellcaster too. Oops. Yeah, so imagine level 16 talent tester. Let me show you how this like iconic spell worked. It's pretty cool. So Protective Mirage is a iconic spell that this character knows. So on their turn, instead of a composed spell, which is like choose your rune, choose your gesture, choose your inflection, instead of that, you're casting instead an iconic spell. So I'm going to cast Protective Mirage. I do it. It costs me action. It costs me focus. And I now have the Mirage effect that lasts for 10 turns that's active on me. And the way that works is that every time a creature attacks me while I have this Mirage active, clear chat and I'll show you. Suppose this hyena strikes. I'm going to attack. I have all d4s on that attack because I had maximum 6 Banes to this strike because all of the Mirages are currently active on this character. But once I have missed because of an attack, the Mirage state on this character automatically decremented. So I started with 3 Mirages, now I have 2. If I attack again, now I have 4 Banes to the attack, not 6, because there's fewer Mirages still active. But I've missed again, so again, the Mirage count has decremented to 1. If a different hyena were then to attack, it would still have 2 Banes to the attack, but this one was a hit, so it doesn't actually get rid of any Mirages. It's going to hit again. We'll see if it misses. Yeah, so when it misses the 3rd time, the entire Protective Mirage effect automatically goes away, and there's no more Banes being applied by that. So, like, really, really pretty, like, sophisticated automation for a spell like that like, it automatically applies all the Banes, it decrements the number of Banes that apply, and it knows how to like expire itself when it runs out of Mirage. That's the kind of thing that like, in order to accomplish that, you need the power of hooks to have a little bit of custom code. Not everyone has to make features that are that sophisticated though. I mean, and you know, there'll be channels like in our Discord server. I'm sure people will have a field day with like helping each other to design totally crazy and fun actions that have very sophisticated effects. All right, let me answer some more questions from chat. Someone asked, can you have it target either reflex or fortitude? That's interesting. I mean, it could be done, and that's an example of how the hooks system would work on an action. So if I were to go into Earthbreaker, suppose I went to the Break Earth action, I could go to hooks, and I could add a hook for like, I could add a roll hook. So when I make my roll for the Break Earth attack, I could write some code, like basically in pseudocode, you know, if the target, you know, I'll check my target defenses. So something like const defenses equals target system defenses. Our target's a token, so this would be target actor defenses. And then that would be, I could decompose that into, say, physical, or, you know, fortitude, reflex. I write so much code. I hate writing code live on stream. It's like, for some reason, it just makes your entire capability just go straight out the window. But this would be something like, you know, if fortitude value is greater than reflex value, then action usage defense type equals reflex, else action usage defense type equals fortitude. You could have an action like this that would force, it would basically force using the worse of the two defenses. Like, and that's the kind of thing that, like, you can't configure that easily with just a tag. You don't have a tag that says like the worst one of reflex or fortitude. But that's a place where you can use a hook to say, well, I'll actually write some little piece of code to toggle, like, is it going to target reflex or is it going to target fortitude? So yeah, I'm not going to actually try and run this. I've probably made some trivial little error in like the way that I wrote this code, but that would be the idea of how to do something even more advanced, like this weapon is so powerful that it seeks out your weaker defense type or something. Yeah, having people look over your shoulder is a bane to your programming skill. It's so true. Well, it's also just like being on stream in general. It's a lot of like things to be aware of, like the chat, the camera, you know, the mic, what I'm showing on my screen. Like, is there background noise in the house that I'm like, oh, are people hearing that on the stream right now? It's like the process of like presenting a stream is already so so like, you know, tense, I guess. It's really hard to be like in relaxed like code flow. All right, let me take some more questions. Let's scroll up. Will Ember have new spells or abilities that can be unlocked outside of leveling that are specific for the setting? Great question. I mean, Ember will definitely have magic items and armor. So something like an Earthbreaker hammer would be exactly the kind of loot that you would get in Ember, and like that item would come along with its action. I also suspect that Ember will have some special iconic spells in Crucible. Like, I think in D&D we're not gonna make new spells, because I think we want the D&D rules to sort of play rules as written. We want people to feel like they're playing like a well-balanced, you know, not homebrew D&D experience, and feel like my D&D character is like playing by the rules of D&D as written. I think for Crucible in Ember, I expect that we will make custom spells for the lore of Ember. Like in Ember we have, you know, agrimages, and agrimages in Ember have this amazing sort of agricultural and, you know, sort of earth and nature and growth based magic that they use in certain ways. And like, we're definitely going to need some spells that reflect like what are the types of spells that an agrimage has in Ember. And so I definitely think for Crucible in Ember there will be definitely things like outside of the talent tree that can give you your character special capabilities. There's no issues with streaming either Crucible or Ember if you have access to the Ember alpha playtest, which is not available yet, so don't anyone mistake my words there. Like Ember's alpha playtest is not yet available, but when it is, there's no issue with streaming Crucible, there's no issue with streaming Ember. You can stream, and if anything, we feel like that helps us to advertise what we're making, and so thank you if you do that. Thank you for doing that and for sharing a view into what we are making. Question from Rax Ray: is it possible for items to give you points on the talent tree? No. I wouldn't say never ever. Who knows? But no, that's not a thing that currently exists. Well, Shifter, maybe I should use the words balance as written. Rules as written, balance as written. I think I don't think it's our business to try and make D&D a differently balanced system than it already is. I mean, we're already taking a little bit of liberty with our influence in the character creation process of the culture path attunement combo instead of background. Like we're already putting our finger on the scale a little bit there, but I think we want if you're playing Ember in D&D, we want you to feel like you know the rules and that you have a command over the rules, and it's not someone else's rules, it's the same rules that's in your your rule book that you have on your shelf. Two related questions that are more about Ember than about Crucible, but will Ember require a particular version of 5e, or will it work with whichever rule set module we have installed? I don't know what the minimum required system version for Ember will end up being. Probably at least 4.0. Ember's not going to release for another year and a half or whatnot, so it's going to be a while. I think Ember will probably require, as of the time that it releases, it will probably require a pretty modern version of the 5e system. Question from SD Shannon: if we play Ember using 5e, do you need to buy all of the Ember 5e, the Foundry VTT 5e content in addition? No, you do not. So Ember and 5e, all you'll need from the 5e side is what's going to be covered in the base system, the basic rules, the SRD. You won't need any, I mean, you can benefit from having the player's handbook from Tasha's, those give you additional character options, they give you additional spells, so there is benefit from having those other premium products if you're playing Ember in 5e, but it's not required. Will Crucible have a way to add homebrew talents for a homebrew setting? Yes. Good question, Grim's Ace. Yes, you can have a custom compendium pack of your own additional talents that you then add into the talent tree. So you can augment the talent tree by adding your own talents to it for homebrew. That is absolutely and importantly supported. So yeah, so the default talent tree that you have here, you could make your own signature talent that would then show up alongside Dreadlord and Inquisitor and Swashbuckler. You could have another option that you add to this node by adding your own special talents into the tree, which then become options that can be selected by players in your game. Question from Josnig: what if I want less automation? How much of it can I turn off? So let me talk a little bit about some of the things that can turn off. The most important one has to do with auto-confirmation of rolls. So there's 3 different auto-confirmation settings: no auto-confirmation, self-target only, or auto-confirm all actions. I personally like the self-target actions only setting. What that means is that when I use a self-target buff, like a buff that doesn't affect any other creature, when I use a feature like I'm going to use Defend, that Defend effect just automatically directly applies. I just click the Defend button and the effect happens. But if I were to change this to... if I were to change this to no auto confirmation at all, I think I might need to reload. I guess it doesn't seem like it, but I'm feeling maybe I do. If I change it to no auto confirmation, then when I use the defend action, it should, we'll see. Yeah. So here, there's no auto confirmation at all. So even something that was like self-target, like defend, it requires a game master to click the confirm button. So like the player might have misclicked and clicked defend, but not actually really meant it. The GM can say, "Oh, did you mean that? Like, you're using the defend action?" And then when that, personal communication is settled, the GM can click confirm, and when the GM clicks confirm, that's when the action actually takes effect and applies. And of course, an attack action like strike is much the same. So the player strikes, that damage does not apply to the Hyena until the game master clicks confirm and says, yes, that was a valid action, you did what you meant to do, that should have happened, so I'm going to confirm it, and that's when the animation happens, that's when the damage applies. Now, alternatively, if I were on the setting that's auto-confirm all actions, then everything is fully automated. So now when I strike, I have insufficient action. Now when I strike with that auto-confirm, with auto-confirm everything on, then as soon as the roll is done, the animation immediately happens, the action is immediately deducted. If it were a hit, that damage is automatically... Ooh, triple eights. Super rare. The 1 in 256 chance of the triple eights on the dice pool. I love it. Maximum damage. Yeah, so if everything is auto-confirmed, then like everything is fully automated. So there is like a degree that you have choice over in terms of how much do you want to have happen automatically versus how much do you want to have that GM approval workflow. Yeah. Hopefully that answers your question a little bit, Josnig. There are some other things that currently there's no way to like opt out of. So for example, like if you're trying to attack this hyena and you click strike, you're out of range, your dagger's range is 1 feet. There isn't currently a way to say, fuck it, I don't care that I'm out of range, roll anyways. That would probably be a good thing to have some way for that to exist. That's something that doesn't exist right now. Like, it does actually stop you from making this attack. If you're out of range, you have to, you have to move into range and then you can do it. So that's the kind of thing that, like, as we get further along with the playtest, as we add more features, having a way to say, like, I don't care that I'm out of range, like, just do it, game. Don't argue with me. That's probably a good thing to have, somehow. Question from Pickrioling. How flexible is Crucible from a homebrew perspective? I mean, I would say that, like, if Crucible is not flexible from a homebrew perspective, then Crucible is a failed system, because Crucible doesn't have a setting. I mean, it will have a setting with Ember, but Crucible as a system, it's not like, oh, you're playing in this world and these are the ancestries and these are the spells. Like, Crucible exists to be a framework for homebrew. And so, that is kind of like the point of it. Like, it's not prescriptive at saying, like, this is our world, you're going to play in it. It is if you're playing Ember. I mean, Ember is our world, and if you're playing Ember plus Crucible, then yes, you're opting into our setting. But Crucible as a system on its own, it's not specific about any of those things. It expects you as the GM to homebrew. It expects you to change it and to add your ancestries and add your backgrounds and add your custom items and add your custom spells. It expects you to do those things to a degree. It's going to provide a bunch of creatures. It's going to provide a bunch of spells. It's going to provide a bunch of talents, and I expect a lot of people will just use those and be perfectly happy with it. But I think the expectation is that the GM's adding their own content. Thank you, TJ. I'm not sure I'm totally settled on this yet, and I do plan to do a custom token HUD eventually. One of the things I really want to do with the HUD is like a little action, like an action bar HUD. So like your favorite actions on your character sheet will also show up in the HUD. So like if I'm wanting to attack this hyena, I don't have to actually open my character sheet. I can just use the HUD to do a quick strike if I've already favorited that action. That's something I definitely plan to do. And then the UI here, like some other things I need to do is like if you're actually brought to that weakened state. Let me show what that looks like. So, this happened in the sample combat I ran. Suppose this hyena attacked Belladonna some more after Belladonna's already weakened. And suppose this hits. So 6 more piercing damage comes in. You notice that Belladonna now takes wounds. You're already at 0 health, so now we're taking wounds. And if this hyena were suddenly a level 8 boss with 10 action points and tons of strength, and now Belladonna's really in trouble, and this hyena continues attacking, eventually Belladonna would die, would perish. So the accumulation of these wounds, which don't just easily shake off, over the course of long adventuring days or whatnot, the accumulation of these wounds would eventually prove fatal, and at that point Belladonna would be no more. But anyways, you get the idea. I'm just hammering it home. I also haven't really shown morale damage yet. That's something I should definitely show. So spellcasters. So here we go. We've managed to finally kill Belladonna by doing enough damage there. Now the key thing, of course, is that like if say Belladonna had 16 wounds already, then the next time you get reduced to 0 health, you're just that much closer to the brink. So like the precariousness of your situation, if you're continuing to adventure with wounds already on you, your situation becomes very precarious indeed. Morale damage is another thing I can show. I could have had a cheat code here in this encounter. Ulfin has so these hyena have let's put them back down to 1/2 minion. They have like double the health as morale. They actually have a bigger health pool than a morale pool. So one of the things that Ulfin could have done in this combat is instead use Intimidate and maybe rely on Intimidation to try and drive off these creatures. With a successful Intimidation attack, Ulfin has actually broken the morale of this hyena because the hyena only had 6 morale. So this like Intimidation attack that dealt damage to morale would have perhaps caused this creature to actually like run away from combat. So I hadn't really shown morale damage or morale healing, but the whole morale system, and there's a bunch of enemies that deal morale damage to the party as well. So kind of demoralizing, kind of psychological harm, or kind of otherworldly horror type elements. Dealing with morale damage is something that is probably less common than physical damage, but it's something that's really interesting that comes up. Does the system support triggered actions like opportunity attacks? Yes, absolutely. So let me show you some cool examples of that. So suppose I've got a higher... I'm going to wipe the field here real quick. Higher level character who has some of that. I think Belladonna at higher level has, say, counter evade. Very cool. So suppose higher level Belladonna is going to fight against maybe a sort of orc war boss. Okay, so suppose this orc war boss... oh, here's a cool thing. Belladonna at higher level has this talent called Impetus. And Impetus is a special talent where if you are first in initiative order, you get +1 action on your turn. So if you roll top of the pile on initiative, then Belladonna gets 7 action this turn instead of 6. That's a really fun bonus. And again, fully automated. So like that's the kind of thing that you don't have to do any bookkeeping in order to do. So suppose it's Hammer's turn, and it's going to make some attacks against Belladonna. If we dodge, nope, defended by armor. Glancing. Dodge. There we go. Okay, so if we dodge this attack, then suddenly counter evade pops up as an available action. So counter evade is a talent that Belladonna has. It's from the dexterity part of the tree. It's a reaction attack where if you dodge an incoming melee strike, you can then immediately retaliate with a strike of your own. It costs focus. So if Belladonna has dodged this attack, Belladonna can immediately do a counter evade attack against the attacker to use that evasion that she's performed to retaliate in kind. There's also other sorts of reactions, like if this target runs away from Belladonna, then at the point where it leaves Belladonna's range, she could do a reactive strike when it leaves her engagement. That's another sort of reaction, kind of attack of opportunity kind of thing. There's also a number of talents on the tree, like, for example, the Inquisitor capstone. When an enemy within your engagement radius whom you can see casts a spell, you may react to strike that target. On a critical hit, the target's spell is interrupted and the magic is lost. So the Inquisitor signature talent, the Inquisitor capstone, is sort of like an anti-mage melee character of sorts that is able to exploit being in base to base with a spellcaster to like use their attacks to interrupt enemy spellcasting. Very powerful. So yeah, there's lots of ways, there's lots of reactions in Crucible. There's lots of opportunities to do things off of your turn. Some of them are free in that, like, I mean, they all cost resources. So you notice that, for example, the counter evade cost just focus. Part of the bonus of the counter evade is that you benefit action economy. You don't have to have a saved up action point to do it. But other things like a basic reactive strike, they do require that you've like saved up an action point in order to do that. So, yeah, action economy affects your ability to react as well. You're not limited in the number of reactions you can take on your turn. You can take an unlimited number of reactions on your turn, or not on your turn. You can take an unlimited number of reactions as long as you have the action economy to do it. Some other cool things I can show. There's so much I can show, honestly, like so much. I'm still sort of only scratching the surface in some ways here. So suppose we're in a combat encounter. I see a question about how does delaying your turn work? Old habits die hard, Laszlo. I'm trying to stop saying point. I'm trying. suppose Agnath rolls highest on initiative here, but actually would prefer to go after the Harbinger. Agnath, on their turn, can use the delay action. Now, you can only use the delay action on your turn, and you can only use the delay action if you have not already acted. But I can take the delay action, and delay is a little bit unique because it has a custom little dialogue prompt where you can choose what initiative you want to act at. So I can choose any number between 1 and 15. I can't choose higher than 15. I have to at least delay past Kagura. But say I want to go after the Harbinger, I'll then say, I want to go at 12, please. And then I can delay to 12, and it puts me in there. Now, this actually is wrong. It was supposed to go after the Harbinger, because enemies go first on a tie. So that's a bug I need to fix. However, yeah, if maybe you get the idea. So Kagura, for example, if Kagura were to delay and say, Agnath can't delay anymore. If Kagura were to delay, we'd say we'll delay to 11. And that drops Kagura down in initiative order after the Harbinger and after Durath. And it's now Agnath's turn again because Kagura delayed. Now there's no infinite you delay, I delay, you delay, I delay. Once you've already delayed, you can't do it again. So Agnath can't delay again this round. Agnath is already delayed. So there is sort of a safeguard there to stop just a infinite delay loop. Grim highlights the coolness of a reaction-only character. One of my favorite builds to play around with so far is the Gladiator capstone, the signature. I need to give Gladiator a heroism spender as well. I think Gladiator really needs a heroism action, but Gladiator's the passive part of Gladiator is once per round you can make a reaction strike attack without spending any focus. So all of those sort of reaction spenders, you get improved action economy on that. So parry, dodge, block, you can react to all of those without spending focus once per round, which is really powerful actually. It means you can pump out a lot of reactive strikes over the course of a round that way. Question, will the system be fantasy only, or will it be possible to create sci-fi cyberpunk systems? Yeah, I think that there's so much power here in terms of just the concept of the tree. The possibility for something like an entire sci-fi tree is absolutely there, or an entire cyberpunk tree, absolutely there. It's not something I or we are going to try and do, at least not in the foreseeable future, but I mentioned that there's ways where you can add your own talents into the tree. There's also ways where you could replace the entire tree. So not just add on, you could say, instead of this compendium of talents, instead of this Crucible fantasy talents compendium, use my entire compendium pack of Crucible sci-fi talents instead. And so, the possibility to make your own entire talent tree that's all cyberpunk stuff, I think would be super cool. And honestly, a lot of the way that Spellcraft works, reinterpreting Crucible's dynamic Spellcraft system as a hacking cyberpunk system, I think would be really cool. It's not something that I have the time or the ability to do, but I would find it to be so cool if someone did that as a homebrew thing. Question from Bonar Vici. Can we change the shape of the tree? A module could, JavaScript. but not easily. No, you can't change the shape of the tree. Liz has a question they want bumped, but I don't know what that actually is, so I think you need to re-ask it. Pickrioling asks, is there support for ally creatures? Yes. I haven't showed summons yet. Let's show summons. Okay, so on Fizzit's turn, Fizzit is a conjurer. Fizzit is a level 6 version of Fizzit. Fizzit has the conjurer capstone and the create gesture. Now, you don't have to be a conjurer to do summons. You do need the create gesture. Fizzit's going to cast a spell and going to do a frost creation. As a frost creation, I can conjure an elemental ally. I'll put down my spot of where I want to do the conjuration, and I'll complete my action, confirm it, and oh, the size ended up being wrong there. That's a bug I'll need to fix. I'll note that down. The creation of frost should be a size 2. Yeah, that was a bug that it got the wrong dimensions. But our creation of frost was automatically summoned and automatically went into initiative order, and Fizzit now also has an active effect that tracks that Fizzit has an icy creation summoned. Now Fizzit, if they had more action, now they can't afford to do another summon this turn, so maybe they'll like recover focus. But if it comes back to Fizzit's turn, uh-oh, I think I've encountered a bug. Something seems to be freezing up on me. There hasn't been too many bugs in this stream so far, which is a good news. But it's not letting me advance. So yeah, there's some kind of bug here that I've just encountered. Let's try reloading. Reload fixed it, so I don't know. I'll have to try and reproduce and debug that later. But yeah, if we're back on Fizzit's turn again, Fizzit can actually conjure a second elemental. Fizzit can, as a conjurer signature, Fizzit could conjure up to 3, actually. 3 different elementals. And again, the size is wrong, but you get the idea. And again, I've hit this bug, so there's some bug with like advancing the round when there's conjured creatures present. So I'm not going to do it anymore, but you get the idea. You get these summons, and that becomes a second effect tracked on Fizzit. We know we've got 2 different icy creations, each of which have their own duration. I need to make it to the, if you end one of those effects, it disappears, but it's just a to-do. Yeah, so there are allied creatures. They don't have to be short duration. They can be long duration or even permanent. Like, for example, there's a Beastmaster signature talent, which would have a permanent animal companion. There's so many different types of talents, and not just talents that already exist, but talents that conceptually exist that will be implemented. Yeah. Summoned an ice creature caused freezing. Yeah, the irony is thick. Claude Kenny asks, JB2A integration, do you have plans when there isn't a matching animation for what you envision the spell ability to look like? How hard is it to configure your own animations into the workflow? It's pretty easy for some things. There's a few places where it's still sort of hard-coded, but for a weapon, I've actually already made it really easy. I need to make it similarly easy for other things. So suppose, like, this Harbinger, one of its weapons is its pestilent tongue. I can configure as part of this weapon, I could configure like what JB2A animation should be used when this weapon is used to attack, or what JB2A animation should be used when a certain action or a certain spell is used to attack. So yeah, it should be pretty simple to configure that if you're making homebrew stuff. I put it somewhere we couldn't actually see the configuration window. I think I need to double check it. Like, it was in the prior playtest. There was a field on the weapon configuration for like the animation, and it's not there anymore. So that's actually something I need to take note of and re-add. So that piece of support has dropped off the radar, but it will come back. Borain the Bear, are we working with JB2A to make any custom animations? So I love JB2A. Jules and Ben are great, and they make wonderful stuff. I think that I don't know in the long run whether Crucible will use JB2A or whether Crucible might have its own animation suite. In the near term, integrating with Sequencer and JB2A is absolutely the best and easiest way to move forward. In the long term, I might envision that Crucible spells and abilities have their own sort of more proprietary animation library that's doing more sprite and shader based animation and less use of video files, because for the technology set that Foundry uses, sprite animation and video and shader animation, sprites and shaders, is a more ideal way to handle a lot of these things. Video files, of course, are very flexible and much easier to use, but yeah, we'll see in the long run. I love what Jules and Ben are doing, though. I think JB2A is a tremendous library for all kinds of things, and I'm happy to just integrate with it for now. The long run might be years away, so it's not like I'm trying to get away from that in the near term. Question from Mooman. Will there be any aids for things that aren't possible to automate? For example, a sword that gives 2 boons when under a full moon. Well, so the thing is, like, it is possible to automate, because what you have is in your action preparation, you have a prepare hook, right? And you can say, like, when this action is prepared, if moon full action usage boons full moon equals, you can add these boons in. So that I take your question, but I also want to say, like, more is possible to automate than you might think. It's not too hard to do that, and so yeah, a lot of automation is possible, but imagining that there's something where automation is not possible, of course, the other thing to note is that, like, whenever you make a strike or whenever you do something, like take an action, you do have this dialogue, so you can always manually add 2 boons, and you can just say, like, I as the GM am gonna say, you've done a really clever bit of role play, and you've described the way that you make this attack, and you've really convinced me that you have an advantage here. So I'm gonna say you get 3 boons on the attack, and you can just manually add them. Now, as far as, like, would there be a reminder? Like, remember, do you have moon boons? I don't have a framework in mind for that. It's possible that some sort of reminder system could be added, but I think this dialogue itself is sort of the reminder system. It's like, you're going to make a strike. Are you sure? Do you have any additional boons that are as of yet undeclared? Do you need to declare any boons or declare any banes that aren't already listed? Thank you, FML2. Oh, yeah. Fuck my life. Thank you for that compliment. I spent a lot of time working on these new sheets, and so I'm really glad to hear that folks are liking them. I think they came out very well. Let's talk a little bit about building a custom enemy. So I'm going to make an adversary. Let's make a... I want to see what I already have easily to hand here. I guess maybe... I've only made a few adversary options in the archetypes thing so far, but let's maybe make an ogre mage. I wonder if I have a suitable token for this. I would have to spend some time looking through, so I'm not gonna... I'll just choose a giant. We'll make this crystal, this frost giant, our ogre mage. So to make an adversary, we're going to give it, much like a heroic character has an ancestry and a background, we're going to give our adversary a archetype and a taxonomy. So taxonomy is the type of creature that it is. So I already have made here an ogre taxonomy. Ogres are a type of giant. They're size 6. They're a little bit slow for their size, so only stride 10. Ogres have a certain base set of abilities and a certain amount of resistance scaling. So ogres are strong against bludgeoning and strong against poison, but they're a little bit weak to fire and they're a little bit weak to psychic. They're very tough, but they're not very intellectual. They're very strong, but they're not particularly dexterous. So this defines the sort of base template for an ogre. I can then just drag and drop that template on here, and I've now filled out part of my ogre mage. Now, I also need to choose an archetype. So ogre is sort of the physiological or biological class of creature that this is. But the archetype is like, so what do you do? What's your style of action? What type of character are you? And we'll make this a mage. So I'll drop the mage archetype. Gives me scaling that prefers intellect and prefers presence. It gives a bunch of gestures and action and talents that come along with the archetype. And so I'll drop the mage on here. And now I've got an ogre mage as the combination of taxonomy and archetype, and I can level it up. We'll make this a level 8 elite ogre mage. So, I'm still strong and tough because I'm an ogre, but I now also have some intellect and presence that I wouldn't have if I were, say, an ogre berserker. So if I, instead of mage, if I drop berserker on there instead, now I'm really strong and really tough, but not very intellectual. And so the choice of archetype harmonizes with the base taxonomy to ultimately create the final mix of stuff that you have. Now, it left the berserker things on there when I did that experiment, but you get the idea. I'll remove those. Yeah, really kind of fun and easy to kind of build a bear, build a creature, choose its threat level, and of course as it levels up, it's putting points into the stats that it needs for its archetype. So as it gets to be very high level, it's boosting its intellect a lot because it's a mage, whereas if it were a berserker, it would be continuing to boost its strength more and toughness. So here we've got a level 8 ogre mage that knows a certain number of runes and spellcraft talents and whatnot, but we want to make this a little bit more challenging of an adversary, so we can take any additional talents that we want and we can drop those in there. So like we want to say these aren't enough. I want for sure we want to have the pulse gesture, and we want to have ogre mage feels like maybe it's a little bit more on the, not necessarily evil, but like slightly malevolent side of things. So we'll give it the death rune, and lightning, maybe the shadow rune, and then some inflection would be good. Maybe we'll show off the reshape inflection. Okay, so here we've got our ogre mage, and suppose the ogre mage strides into the midst of the party here. Now these are level 6 characters, so a level 8 elite isn't actually like, you know, that's not out of the realm of possibility for them to fight. Suppose the ogre mage has with it some, you know, skeleton, undead sort of skeleton minions that are kind of participating in the combat as well. I'll show off how some of the inflections work. So the ogre mage here could use cast a spell to compose a pulse of, let's say, like a death pulse. So death pulse would be like a huge area, you know, blast all around it of energy. Now, by default, this death pulse is going to target both friends and foes because it's just an explosion of energy. But the ogre mage has the reshape inflection. And so if I use the reshape inflection, I can replace my target template, and hopefully this will work. Let me try it one more time. It didn't actually work. Let's try it again. Death, pulse, reshape. Ah, I see the problem. I see the problem. I don't have the correct disposition set on my ogre mage. It's neutral, so it's treating the skeletons as enemies. I need to change it to hostile so that it is sort of allied with the skeletons. That was my problem. I think eventually, by the way, off topic, I think eventually I'm going to add a more robust, like, group or like faction designation for characters so that you can have more precise control over saying, like, is the skeletons allied with the ogre mage or neutral or not? Like, I think we need more ability to configure, like, who is an enemy of whom. But that will come later. But anyways, so I've corrected my disposition. So now I'm going to cast my spell. We'll do a lightning pulse. I like a lightning pulse better. So if I do a lightning pulse, it's hitting everything. But if I reshape it, then my lightning pulse is only hitting the player characters, and it's leaving my skeletal minions alone. And so this, you know, 16 electrical damage to Durath, or if I do it again, and this time I'll do a death pulse, reshaped death pulse. Oops, I forgot to place the template. That should stop me from doing it, but it currently doesn't. Reshaped death pulse, targeting fortitude. Ooh, nasty. Yeah, AoE damage to everybody. So yeah, there's an example of just like building an adversary from scratch, assigning it a taxonomy, an archetype. Of course, we need to assign it inventory and whatnot as well. So we'll pull out armor and we'll say, you know, ogre mage has scale mail, medium armor, equipped, and it has weapons. It's got a mage staff, two-handed talisman, mage staff equipped. Anyways, an example of creating a NPC, an adversary. All right, let's take a couple more questions. Question from Grims. Will there be innate support for lootable actors and merchants? I don't know. Maybe. You'll need a module for now. I don't have any plan to add that at the moment. Question from Liaren. What are the highlighted action circles in the Ogre Mage sheet? Highlighted action circles. Oh, I think under the resources section, that's the so those are a little bit special actions. So elite and boss enemies get action above the base 6. So like the double circle is kind of like the number of action that the creature has above what is standard. And so those like extra actions have some at least envisioned, intentioned specific uses where like those extra actions can be spent in certain ways to make elites and bosses even more dangerous. You can think of them, they're not exactly like legendary actions in 5e, but you can almost think of them as like those extra actions that an elite or a boss has in excess of their base 6 are things that they could then use to maybe do certain actions off turn or something like that. But like once they've spent those and they're down to their, you know, standard set of 6, they can no longer do that. But it's designed to sort of keep the boss from getting totally screwed over. Like if they're at the bottom of initiative order, like those extra actions give the boss the ability to say like, I'm not going to wait for my turn. I'm going to go ahead and do something now. I haven't designed that yet. It's more like something that I'm thinking ahead about. And so they don't really mean anything just yet, but that's sort of the direction that I think I'm going with the sort of the double pip around actions in excess of 6. Let's see. Question from Varys. What other system elements do you envision or want to tackle for Crucible? Yeah, definitely exploration challenges. I really like the way that some systems handle this. You know, I think there's like some free league systems that handle this very well. I think what Cosmere that was recently on Kickstarter is doing with their endeavors is pretty nice. I think the idea of like the group exploration challenge is something that I plan to develop for Crucible. Also a sort of social tug of war challenge, like the social argument where you and your allies are in opposed debate against a group or a person, where you want to either, you want to achieve some sort of social result. I have an idea in mind for how there would be a kind of gamified representation of that sort of social struggle. And I don't know if it'll work. I still have to prototype it, and we'll have to see if it seems fun. But that's something that I want to try and build. Certainly like more talents. We need more expansion of the talent tree, more nodes, more options at nodes, more talents, more build options. That's going to be a huge investment, still yet to go. Some like a lot still to do, really. A lot more iconic spells, like a whole compendium of, at least 100 iconic spells that Crucible comes with out of the box. I think that would be my goal. Is it possible for a player to get greater than 6 actions? Yes, under specific circumstances. So the impetus talent that I showed earlier in the stream is one such example. There are other examples where not necessarily you increase your max talent, but there's like a node like Blood Frenzy where it's like a high strength, tier 5, strength 7 required node. Your Battle Lust spurs you to feats of heightened action. When you achieve a critical hit that deals damage to health, you immediately gain +1 action. This benefit may only happen once per round. So like once per round, if you crit, you get an action back. There's things like that. There's things like you can think of like a haste spell of sorts, like the kind of magic that does a sort of haste spell. That will definitely be one of the options in the sort of iconic spell repertoire. A haste spell of sorts would increase maximum action. So yeah, several ways that can happen, although relatively rare. Let's see. Question from Mute Foxy. Vaguely remember on Playtest 1 that I wanted to add more rings to the talent tree. Yeah, so I did add one more ring to the talent tree compared to the last playtest. There's a whole new some changes to the talent tree. There's a whole new outer perimeter ring, like this ring where I just showed that Blood Frenzy talent. This outer ring is new, so I expanded one ring since the last one. Also, a big change to the talent tree is that the signature nodes at tier 3, these tier 3 nodes now only require level 3 rather than level 5 that they previously did. Now the attribute requirement you need is still the same. You still need like Wisdom 5, Dex 5 to be a monk. So you still have to hit the ability score requirement. So it's not really much easier, but you can get your signature talents earlier on now. I didn't like it being like all the way until level 5 that you were able to get your first signature talent. That felt too long for your character's, narrative progression to start feeling like you have like a main thing that starts to guide and define, your character's choices and journey. So signatures, the first ring of signatures is now available at level 3. It still has the ability score requirement. The other big thing about this ring of signatures is that now they're clustered. So every signature that uses wisdom and is a jump to the other side of the tree is now in this centralized node. Now these edge nodes are the ones where the two quadrants or hexants of the tree are directly adjacent. So strength and wisdom are directly adjacent. So justice is directly here, but here the Dreadlord talent that Durath picked up has allowed Durath to teleport over to the same Dreadlord talent on the presence side of the tree. And Durath actually has 2 signature talents at level 6. Durath also picked up Rune Warden, and Rune Warden has allowed, from the toughness side, Rune Warden has allowed Durath to teleport over to that same signature node on the wisdom side. So Rune Warden is present in both of those, and so it allows you to jump across the tree when you take one of those signature nodes. Now Durath isn't going to invest much into wisdom more than this, but a dip into wisdom that gets Rune Warden now allows Durath to pick up, if desired, some of these nodes around the wisdom rune, or the wisdom signature. Let's make a monk. We'll do human. Human and maybe wanderer. So we're going to want some dexterity and some wisdom. Maybe just a tiny bit of other stuff. And then athletics seems good, and maybe awareness. So I'm going to want like unarmed weapon training. Oh, I need 3 strength for that. I do need some strength. I'm not going to need a lot of strength, but I'm definitely going to need some. So let's drop intellect and let's take a point. I don't need to be very intellectual with this build. That's okay. Take unarmed here. Martial artist. I don't want to be all passive though, so let's take like stunning strike level 1 for unarmed. But level 1's not so fun. So let's like level this character up to 6 and see how it would go. We'll take like more dexterity, more wisdom, maybe a touch more strength, touch more toughness. skills would look like athletics. I could keep investing into it where I can choose my athletics specialization. Traceur, like a parkour expert, seems very monkly. Awareness, also I'll keep investing into that. Prescient, I like the idea that like I can really be highly attuned to the behavior of others. Maybe I'll take some medicine, so I have like sort of forensics of a bit, and maybe diplomacy, so that I have a social skill. Then on the talent tree at level 6, I would have 10 talents that I can buy. So I love battle focus as a monk. That's a really good one. So whenever I crit, I get a focus point once per round. But that's going to really help with the monk's focus economy. I need to get up to here for the capstone. I need to get up to monk in wisdom, or I need to get to it down in dexterity. I could go about it either way. I think I'm going to go the wisdom route, though. I would definitely want patient deflection, so that gives me, if I'm unarmed and unarmored, I add my wisdom score to my parry defense. That's like a must-have. Take the monk capstone. Planned defense is good as a monk as well. These are good things. Now, that lets me warp over to the dex side. Now that I've purchased the monk signature, I can actually now get over here to dexterity. So I can take counter evade because I'm going to be dodging a lot. I can take flying kick would be good if I work my way over to it. Do I want to take something here to get that? Flurry can be good as a monk so that I can do like a flurry of blows type attack. So flurry of blows, flying kick, maybe... What else do I want out of this? Yeah, I can't afford Sundering Strike, so I don't need that. Maybe something toughness, though. Thick Skin, because I'm going to be, like, in combat a bit. That'll give me some physical resistance, and then I could also take, like, Second Wind. That would be good, because I'll have a focus generator mechanism, so that I can use Second Wind for, like, self-healing. Whenever I generate a focus, I can spend that focus to heal myself. 1 point left. What do I want my monk to have here? Oh, Martial Artist. I definitely should take Martial Artist. So, okay. Oh, wait, you know what? I think I want... There is a dex node over here. Unarmed blocking. I definitely want unarmed blocking. So, I think I want that more than planned defense. We'll take unarmed blocking. So I have my toughness score to block defense. So now, as a monk, level 6... oh, I still have a skill point to spend. Oh, I still have 3 skill points to spend. Dang. Okay. Society. And Wilderness. So yeah, now as a monk, I have 19 physical defense completely unarmored because I took some of those talents. So, like, I have really good dodge, of course, because of my dexterity. But I have 3 parry and 2 block as well. So, like, my physical defense is actually quite good, even though I don't have any armor on. And then I've got all of these different things as a monk, actions that I can take. Double punch, flurry, flying kick, counter evade. I've got good, like, reaction, second wind, stunning strike. I've got, like, all of this stuff that I can do. I could also wield weapons, too, if I wanted to. So, you know, like, there are weapons that work well with a sort of monk build, like a pair of sais is kind of cool. If I wanted to go that way, I get, like, some parry that route instead of through unarmed blocking. But I took the unarmed blocking talent, so I wouldn't want to take sais. I would want to take advantage of my fully unarmed build. Because I took that talent, I wouldn't have to. So yeah, got some cool stuff I can do here. The double punch action is pretty cool. Like, it gives me, like, really great action economy with sort of, like, dual wield, 2 strikes for the price of 1. Yeah, cool stuff that can be done with that sort of build. All right, let me take some more questions. I'm probably like starting to tire a little bit. It's been almost 3 hours, so I think I'm going to look to wrap up soon. But I want to take a few more questions, and then I want to do a giveaway because I want to reward those of you who have shown interest in Crucible and stuck with it this long and hang out with me all afternoon. So what I'm going to do in 5 minutes at 5 p.m. Eastern, so at the hour mark, in 5 minutes I'm going to do a giveaway. So what you need to do between now and then is you need to be logged in to Twitch. So if you're logged in, you will be eligible for the giveaway. So yeah, all you've got to do is just be logged in, and that way you'll be automatically entered and able to win. And this is going to be a giveaway to hook people up with alpha access to Ember. Yeah, Ember is the theme of the month, and so 2 of you lucky winners in chat will get invited to join our exclusive Ember alpha test early next year. In the meantime, we can just look at some other character builds. This is like a fire caster, elemental caster, war mage. You know, great sort of spell casting flexibility with like Kinesis Rune, Illumination, the Pulse Gesture, Arrow Gesture. This character has like really good, like flexible spell casting, like lots of different stuff that you could do with this combination of runes and gestures and inflection. Also 3 iconic spell slots because you get, this character has 1 iconic spell from the, 1 iconic spell slot from the Determine inflection. So they're harder to counterspell if they use that. And then 2 iconic spell slots from the War Mage signature. So this level 6 character has 3 iconic spell slots that they could fill with spells that either come out of the Crucible Spells Compendium or spells that they sort of homebrew with their GM. Sort of like a, I want to invent my own spell kind of thing. Another character build that's pretty cool, healer build. I haven't shown how healing works. Healing is really pretty fun, actually. I generally like don't find healing to be like that enjoyable in TTRPGs, but I really like it in in Crucible because the composed spell system just makes it feel like I'm doing a lot more kind of cool stuff. Like I can cast like a ray of life, like I can use like the ray gesture, and I can place this ray so that it like, oh, that hit a spearman, I don't want to hit the skeleton, let me reset that, I'll do it just here, so I get my allies but not the enemy. Like I can cast like a ray of healing. Let me make everyone a little bit wounded. Yeah, so I suppose I like I'll cast a composed ray of life. Composed inflection means it takes more action to cast, but it doesn't cost me any focus. So like I could sustain this kind of like composed ray. Oh, what happened? Bug? Question mark? Let me try again. What happened? Life, ray, compose, template, cast. Oh, I don't know what happened. Something happened. Didn't work, but this time it did. Yeah, so like this ray, I've actually succeeded in healing 2 of my allies. One of them, my magic did not succeed in healing them, but I've succeeded in like one of them was a critical heal, 21 points of healing to Agnath, and so like I'm able to use as a healer, I'm able to use my own positioning and my own like tactical acumen. It's not just like healing word. You know, it's like you actually have roles to make as a healer. You actually have like positioning that matters. You can critical heal. Your healing isn't guaranteed to succeed, and so you notice that one of the healing was resisted. It's not that your ally wants to resist your healing. It's not that they don't want to be healed. It's just that when they've taken wounds, sometimes healing isn't guaranteed to work. You still have to roll as a healer. You still have to succeed with your with weaving your magic, and it actually gets harder to heal someone the more wounded that they are. So that's another real hazard of accumulating wounds. So suppose Durath here, who has a little bit of short-term health damage, suppose Durath also had, say, 56 wounds that Durath was lugging around. Durath's wounds threshold, like the threshold that you have to roll above in order to succeed on the heal, goes up. So the more wounded, like the more long-term wounded Durath is, say Durath is like on the brink of death, 90 wounds that Durath is lugging around here. When I, as Kagura, try and cast my, Ray of Life spell and hit my ally Durath with it, the threshold that I have to roll over in order to successfully heal Durath is super high, and I've failed again. He's too wounded, like my magic is just like not taking hold. There's talents that play into that as well. So like, for example, you can think of like if any of you played like a MOBA game or like a MMO or something where you've got like an attack that can make healing less effective against a target. There's actions like that in Crucible where like you can debuff an enemy, raising their healing threshold. So like your offensive debuff makes it harder for them to be healed. So yeah, there's all kinds of like cool mechanics that actually like makes healing a lot more active and thoughtful and mechanically crunchy than just like I cast a spell and it works. Okay, it's 5 o'clock. I need to get the giveaway going. So I'm going to just do this real quick. Let's see. I'm expecting... I think Nath is going to give me the list, although maybe still pulling it together. Oh, here it comes. Question while I'm waiting for that, what modules I'm using. Currently, Dice So Nice, JB2A, Sequencer, and Tabletop RPG Music is what I'm running in this world right now. I'll buy time. The list is still coming together, so it's okay. A little bit more time for those of you who aren't yet logged in to get logged into Twitch. And I'm pulling that list together right now. So if you are a winner, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to say in chat that you accept the prize. And so if you win, you will need to confirm in chat that you are here and that you accept the winning. And if we get anyone who isn't actually here, then I will roll again and draw a different winner. So just setting up a rollable table right now that I can use for the giveaway. Let's see. Crucible Q&A giveaway. All right, I've got my rollable table. Crucible Q&A giveaway, September 27th, 2024. 99 of you, not too many. That seems surprisingly low. Nath, why don't we double check this before I roll? Are we sure that there's only 99 people logged in? Or was that like a pagination issue? I don't wanna omit anybody. That looks low. I feel like that's not everybody. Let's double check before we do this. I want to get it right. I mean, it's natural that the number is lower than the viewer count because there's viewers that aren't logged in. But that sounds low. In my experience, usually it's about like 2/3 of the viewer count. Let's just double check. A question from Grim's Ace: how do you regenerate wounds over time. It's a little bit TBD. There's in my mind, sort of a long rest mechanic where you have some natural healing, like slow healing just naturally as days pass. It's probably your toughness score. So for example, like Durath with a toughness of 5 might recover 5 wounds per day just automatically. And then on top of that, some magical healing that can sort of speed up the healing process, but not like all at once, except maybe only exceptionally powerful magic would be like an insta heal of your wounds, but more like a magical effect that could, you know, give you like +2 or +3 wounds recovered when you rest, something like that. But it is going to be sort of a slow process of recovering wounds. So if you have a really dangerous encounter that is really damaging to you, you might take some time to, you know, fully work off the lingering effects of that encounter. And that's, I think, something that I'm pretty interested in the design of, that it, you know, it would make your choices and consequences in combat a little bit more meaningful, because, you know, you have more incentive to avoid needless combat. Like a needless combat could be one that results in you sustaining wounds. And so, you know, having a reason to avoid that fight if you don't have to fight it, you know, is the kind of thing that I think is sort of interesting to me to explore further. I think the lingering wounds aspect of the system is something that I think should create better incentives for decision making on that front. Yeah, the near death fight that's fixed up by a good night's sleep. Yeah, I think it's tough. Okay, we have 190 results this time, so I think that looks more right. So we got everyone in here now. So let's go ahead and do our giveaway. I'm going to draw 2 of you, and if you're here, if you are a winner, I need you to say something in chat to confirm that you accept. And everyone, drum roll please, channel your good luck, and away we go. First winner is D&D Totale Spire Live. Total Espire Live. I think there's probably a word there that I'm missing. But D&D Total Espire Live. Second winner, Rune Dragon Rune, and D&D Total Espire Live. D&D to Tailspire. That's probably right. D&D to Tailspire. Cool software. D&D to Tailspire Live. You are the winner if you are present and you wish to accept. Also, Rune Dragon Rune won and accepts. Congratulations, Rune Dragon Rune. You are the lucky winner of Ember Alpha Access. What you will need to do is to send me a DM on Twitch to this account and remind me that you are a winner, and I will follow up with you later to get that to you. Now, the Ember Alpha has not started yet. It won't start until next year, so it will be a little bit of time until you actually receive your prize. But I will get you added to the list of folks that are going to get Alpha Access regardless of your Kickstarter pledge tier. You are in. Okay. Did we get an accept from Tailspire? I don't think so. All right, let's roll again. Sparky Bagman. Sparky Bagman, you are the replacement winner if you are here, and if you are interested in winning Ember Alpha Access. We'll see if we get an acceptance there. So a quick note on Ember Alpha. It is probably the very first Ember Alpha that we put out is probably going to be D&D only. It's possible that Crucible will be an option at that point, but it's more likely that Crucible access will be added, Crucible support will be added to the Alpha at some point over the course of the Alpha. So if you're especially excited about Crucible, just want to set realistic expectations that it will probably be a slightly longer wait for the Crucible alpha than for the D&D alpha for Ember. But, you know, they're both going to be coming. Okay, re-rolling again. Beer Monkey 11. Beer Monkey 11, you are the lucky winner. If you are here and wish to be a winner, let me know. We'll keep going as long as we have to have two acceptances. We'll go through the entire list if we have to. This Ogre Mage is going to cast a fan of flame. It doesn't care about damaging its allies. It's going to friendly fire away. Ah! Fan of flame. Oh, I only hit one person. Oh well. I think we might have gotten an acceptance. Beer Monkey 11. I got a woot. That approximately counts. All right, he accepted. Good. Thank you both, and thank you everybody for for participating, for being eager winners. I'm sorry that those of you who have been so engaged during the stream. I'm sorry for those of you who did not win, but thank you all very much for participating and for sticking around. We'll have other opportunities to win Ember access in the future. I'm sure this won't be the last chance. And I think I'm gonna wrap up pretty soon. I'll maybe try and take 2 or 3 closing questions to close it out. I want to see if there's anything that folks really want to learn more about. I mean, of course, just please remember, it's not done yet. Crucible, there's a lot more to do. And it's going to take time. It's really complicated, actually. It's quite complicated creating something like this. So I think, just bear that in mind. And as you're trying out the playtest, remember that there's a long way to go still with all of this, but I think I'm really happy with the amount of progress between the last Crucible release and this one. I'm not fully happy with the amount of time between the last Crucible release and this one, but I am happy about the amount of progress. So I think, timeline is something to work on, but there's a big change, a big improvement since last time. Like, all of these apps, I honestly, doing all of the app v2s, all of the application v2 conversions for all of these different system components, that is going to save me so much time moving forward. It was a little bit of a slog to get them all done, but the fact that every single sheet, all the item sheets, all the actor sheets, everything is in that architectural framework now is going to be really great moving forward. So, and Crucible is basically already v13 compatible, so I'm not going to have too much work to do there. Maybe a little bit, because we're not totally done with v13 yet, but I have been using this version of Crucible in v13 as well, so I think we're in good shape for forward-looking changes. v13 is going to be really interesting because one of the big features in v13 is drag ruler. So the way that movement works in Crucible is going to change. So instead of measuring like this and then spacebar moving, it is going to be the sort of drag ruler where you're going to drag your character and it's going to show you the distance and you can leave waypoints and things. So it's going to be a little bit of a different UX, but it's going to be good. And it's going to work well with the Crucible measurement system of measuring out your action points. And it's cool. It adds a bunch of features for remembering how much movement you did earlier in your turn, and that's going to make some things easier too. So I'm excited for all those things. All right, questions. Let's see. Apoc Mora, how can we best support Crucible being grown alongside Ember? I mean, I don't know. I think the community's already done a huge amount there by vocally expressing their excitement for Crucible as an option for playing Ember. I think, success for the Ember Kickstarter, the more people that are on board for Ember, the more like of a kind of commitment and social contract and mechanism there is to like say like, okay, we're doing this. We've got 2,500 people out there who are on board with Ember and wanting it for either 5e or Crucible. And I think just like encouragement and support on that front is really valuable. Like obviously like financially, the better that the Kickstarter does, the better that it helps our team to, employ talented people to get Crucible and Ember and everything else done. But I think it's pretty simple, just helping to spread the word. Once this video is out there on YouTube, if you want to try and talk your friends into watching 3 hours of some nerd talking about their own home creation game system, then that helps. Word of mouth, just it's like we got to convince people to take Crucible seriously the same way that we got to convince people to take Ember seriously. Like we are here to make top quality gaming experiences. Like this isn't just like a vanity project, or it's not just like a offhanded idea like, oh, let's make a game system. Like we're really trying to be serious about this, and like we want it to be really good. And I think like getting people to take Ember seriously, getting people to take Crucible seriously, that helps. Word of mouth helps. Question from Kamatikos: when Crucible becomes more fleshed out, will there be a guide or some API docs similar to Foundry Core? Probably. Yeah, probably. Things are changing quite rapidly still, though, at the moment. Question from SD Shannon: will Crucible support the creation of templates to apply, like if I wanted the Ogre Mage to also be a werewolf? Yeah, good question. I mean, the idea of like possible multi-archetype for an adversary or multi-taxonomy is something that's been discussed. Like instead of just Ogre Mage, do we want to be Ogre Mage Werewolf, all three? I like the idea. I think I would have to make sure it doesn't get like too overpowered, because of course each of those additional archetypes is like giving you more talents. So it needs to be done in some way that like more is not necessarily strictly more, or it affects your threat level or requires certain things. But yeah, I mean, I think that's something that I'd like to do. Question from Dregory Term: will the level cap of Crucible be a multiple of 6? Yeah, currently I'm aiming towards 18 with Crucible. I'd initially been thinking 24, but the density of the talent tree, like what we have now, is basically just up to level 6. And I think about 3x this is going to be a huge effort to accomplish. There's room for it. Like it's planned that it's going to be like 3x this, but that's going to be a huge effort. So I think 18 is what I'm currently looking at for Crucible max level. Question from Adrian Parsons: is it possible to adjust effect templates like custom width cones? The angle of a cone in Crucible is currently set, but that should be something that is theoretically adjustable. Right now it uses there's either the cone type, which is a tighter angle cone, or the fan type, which is a very wide angle cone. But like at the moment it has to be either a cone or a fan. So like a fan is this one, fan of flame. So a fan is like a big sort of arc like this, whereas a cone is a narrow angle. Now that's currently encoded in as like that's what it means for something to be a fan, and that's what it means for something to be a cone. I don't know. I'll have to think about it a little bit more. I think there's some advantages to keeping that locked, because it means that when you're balancing the ability, Like, I know what the area of effect is when it's a cone. It's not variable. It's not like something you just change. Can a DM assign talent points arbitrarily? Not currently, but I think that's a nice idea to have like an override for like a bonus number of talent points that you get, so that the GM could do something like, as a quest reward when you're playing Crucible, I'm going to give you a talent point that you can spend however you like. I think that's a nice idea. So it's not built yet, but I'll file it in the idea drawer. Question from Russell: especially since there's 1 foot increments, have you considered any bonus or penalty based on how much of the token is covered by an area of effect? Yeah, that's another one that's in the idea drawer. I haven't been able to pull it out of the idea drawer yet, but like the difference between Kagura here being fully covered by the fan versus like just like, you know, slightly clipped. This is an interesting thing that could affect some aspects. Like it could be boons or banes, or it could be, you know, some aspect of like damage or something. Like there is an interesting thing there about like how much coverage. Yeah, it's something that is there to think about. Question: what is the average size range for player characters? Sort of standard human is 4. And then like a gnome like Fizzit here would be slightly smaller with a size 3. And then like this Kagura, you know, the giant kin Kagura would be a size 5. This ogre mage size 6. But yeah, size 4 would be sort of the standard prototypical humanoid. Question from ADA Closure: how much of the system can be adapted on the fly? If your players absolutely wallop a boss and you wanted to push them a little bit more. Well, I think it would depend on whether what you're suggesting is, okay, suppose they're fighting this ogre mage and they've got the ogre mage down to like 20 hit health, and you're just like, this is proven to be way too easy. You could upgrade the ogre mage to a boss, but that completely resets their health bar. So like that's kind of a little bit clumsy. It's a little bit obvious. Like really you need to set the threat level of the creature before the encounter begins. You know, in terms of like what options are there for you, I could maybe add an option to like do like a hidden heal. Currently, like right now, whenever the character gains health, like if you as the GM went in and said, I'm gonna add 60 more hit points, players would see that plus 60 health. So maybe a hidden way to do like a hidden health boost if you need to. Of course, there's kind of like other outside of the system tips and tricks you can do, like the boss has a second phase, or a second one shows up. Like there's all kinds of gimmicks like that you can do as a GM. But ideally, and I don't guarantee this during the playtest phase, but ideally, if you're saying like, if you've balanced the encounter and said like, for a level 6 party of 4, that's a threat level 24, we're going to want a threat level 24 for them to face. So we're going to do a level 12 boss. For a level 6 group, they're going to face this level 12 boss, and that's a deadly encounter. If they face that deadly encounter of a level 12 boss as a level 6 group and they win, that's an earned victory in my book. But I think there's a long way to go before we can guarantee that kind of approach to encounter balance actually works and actually, delivers the type of experience that feels the way it should feel. All right. Last question will be Yeah, math, that's right. This is not my final turn. It's not my final form. Last question will be... Waiting for it. Waiting for it. Any ridiculous PC size. So size has a bonus field, and certain spells, I haven't exposed this on the character sheet yet, but certain spells would affect that. So if I say, like, make a macro, like actor, update, system, movement, size bonus, 3. My macro here, you know, this would be like an enlarge effect. So the character has increased to size 7, which increases their engagement and other aspects of their ability set. And so there is like a character attribute for size bonus or size penalty. So like someone casts like a shrink spell on you and says, haha, you're tiny now. Yeah, so now you're tiny. So there can be like effects that would transform the size of a creature above or below their normal level. Okay, I think that's it. Yes or no question from Liz. Have you planned how you're going to rest after this exhausting month? Well, we've still got a couple of very important days of the Kickstarter to go. So we've got to try and push towards our Crucible stretch goal. I hope we'll be able to unlock... I hope we'll be able to push for the 600k stretch goal. It's a stretch goal I'm really excited about. We'll announce it as soon as 500k unlocks. I don't know if we have any chance to hit it or not, but if we have a strong final 48 hours, there's a chance we might get close to 600, and so we'll see. I hope that stretch goal is going to entice you all to keep sounding the alarm and getting people on board with pledging. But yeah, I'm going to be very on it for the next couple days, just trying to do some marketing things and trying to make sure that Ember Kickstarter gets over the line. But after that, I'm going to take a little bit of time to relax, maybe cut back my working hours a little bit. I've been going very hard for the last couple of weeks, and yeah, I want to play Shadow of the Erd Tree. I haven't. I've had to force myself to ignore it because I've been busy. But I think I'm gonna take some time to play more Elden Ring and play Shadow of the Erd Tree. And yeah, that'll be fun. All right. Thank you all very much. I really appreciate you spending time with us. Yeah, thank you all for hanging out together and for all the questions and for all the curiosity about Crucible, and really great stuff. And this video will be available later. You can watch it on Twitch. It'll be also going to YouTube, and so you can catch it at any time. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to sign off for now, but please help spread the word about Ember as we approach our final home sprint, and don't hesitate to engage in the Crucible channel and Discord. I'm eager to hear about your experiences, what you like, what you don't like. Keep the feedback coming, and I will talk with you all very soon. Until then, cheers, farewell, happy gaming, see you next time.